I now call this regular meeting of the Committee of the Whole to order at 5:30 p.m. Please call the roll.
Ms. Pearson?
Present.
Mr. Schubert?
Here.
Ms. McCall?
Present.
Ms. Bennett?
Present.
Mr. Carpenter?
Here.
Ms. Haley?
Here.
Ms. Stanford?
Here.
With 7 present, we have a quorum.
Thank you. We'll now take a moment of silence followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
As we start each meeting, it bears reminding the mission of Rockford Public Schools is to collaboratively engage all students in an equitable first-class education for a changing world. I wish to welcome the Superintendent Student Advisory Council Representative, Stella, and correct me if I mispronounce your name, Seminario? Thank you, from Guilford High School. Are there any changes, corrections, or additions to the meeting minutes? If not, please nod in consensus to approve. Thank you. Ms. Stanford will now lead the Stakeholders Committee portion of the meeting. Ms. Stanford?
Thank you, thank you. Okay, so we're going to begin our report. Maybe? To turn it on. There was an arrow up there a second. Help? Help? I got nothing. Oh, gosh. Okay, sorry about that. Sorry. Okay, here we go. We begin by showing this committee's 12-month agenda. Our feature presentation will be with Jim Parker, East High School principal, and representatives from Think Big to discuss an exciting collaboration with teaching students about entrepreneurship. But first, let's begin by celebrating the good things happening in our district. Congratulations, the P40 Literacy Power Hour is a cornerstone of Washington Elementary's educational strategy, designed to empower students with the essential skills necessary for academic success and lifelong learning. Students, teachers, families, school board members, and other stakeholders were on hand to celebrate the accomplishments of students at Washington Elementary School. Under the guidance of passionate educators and with the enthusiastic support of parents in the community, students at Washington Elementary have embraced the challenge of mastering foundational reading skills. Through the P40 Literacy Power Hour, students have not only learned to read, but have also developed a profound love for literature and a thirst for knowledge. The Literacy Promotion Ceremony serves as a testament to the dedication and hard work of both students and educators. With great pride, Washington Elementary celebrates 70 students crossing the threshold from learning to read to reading to learn, a transformation that opens doors to endless possibilities and sets the stage for academic achievement. Bot Battle. Congratulations to both East High School and Guilford High School's robotics team. They competed in the first Tech Challenge tournament on Saturday. The E-Rabs took home the Rookie Sensation Award. Guilford's Robo Vikings were awarded second place in the Connect Award. That's given to teams that most connect with their local science, technology, engineering, and math community. A true FIRST robotics team is more than the sum of its parts and recognizes that engaging their local STEM community plays an essential part in their success. In the month of February, Dr. Jarrett and Mr. Dotson Jr. visited Lincoln, Haskell, Nashhold, Spring Creek, Risa, Fairview, Roosevelt, Bloom, Guilford, Eisenhower, and Johnson. Here are some of the pictures highlighting Earl and Aaron's visits. During his visit at Spring Creek, Mr. Dotson took pictures with 3 outstanding teachers from the first grade team who are retiring at the end of the year. Michelle Vale, Annalisa Thompson, and Susan DeCastros. They will be missed and we will wish them well. We always enjoy seeing the smiling faces of students and teachers. Dr. Reed hosted a student listening session on February 19th for over 70 5th through 8th graders, and on February 20th for 35 high school students from schools all over the district. The students were given tours of various departments based on their selected interests and were treated to lunch from our nutrition services team. The DEI and communications team then facilitated a listening session where students were asked a variety of questions and provided feedback on the 10 topics that they selected as high priorities: grades, behavior, expectations, communication, attendance, math, social media, incentives, and reading. This feedback will be presented to the principals at a later date to use for professional development and to share with teachers. Once again, great job to these scholars for demonstrating leadership skills and helping to empower other young voices while contributing to the betterment of our school district. Keep up the good work. The RPS 205 Valkyries thrilled audiences with their 60th anniversary show. This year's performance featured a diverse cast of 22 girls, 8 guys, 4 MCs, 19 alumni dating back to 1982, 37 future Valkyries from RPS schools spanning kindergarten through 8th grade, and 8 senior salute performers honoring the graduating seniors. The festivities kicked off at Guilford High School on Tuesday, February 27th, marking the opening night of the 8 performance extravaganza. The performances featured a mini show showcasing alumni performances, future Valkyries, and the dynamic guy-girl Valkyrie ensemble. Tune into our latest 205 Vibe podcast episode featuring Maria Montessori at Marsh Principal Candace Collins. We dive into the school's remarkable achievements highlighted on the Illinois State Report Card, gain insights into their journey towards excellence in education. Don't miss out on this enlightening discussion. This year's legislative lunch has been scheduled for Wednesday, April 24th from noon to 1:30 at Jefferson High School. We would like to engage our legislators on a focused discussion around our facilities master plan and how the state of Illinois can support our efforts. Afterwards, we will offer a tour next door at our College and Career Readiness Center for anyone interested. We look forward to our school board members being in attendance along with students from the Superintendent Student Advisory Council. Please RSVP your attendance with Amy Lozano if you haven't already done so. We look forward to seeing you. Valbrun met with principals and members of the cabinet at the Rockford Valley College and Career Readiness Center. Valbrun provided a workshop and continues to support our principals in helping to create a sense of belonging in their schools. The next phase of the work is preparing and assisting principals with creating a professional development curriculum as they begin to share this work with teachers. And now, for our feature presentation, I'll turn the floor over to Principal Jim Parker and representatives from Think Big to discuss their collaboration at East High School.
Thank you. And before they come, just to remind the board, if you recall, back in August, I believe I gave a presentation and we talked about this particular collaboration. And so we have representatives here this evening, Jim Parker from East and Danielle Bruja, the teacher, and then Dr. Sheila Hill and Mr. Dante Matthews, just to give us a focus update on the work that they've been doing. And so I'll turn the floor over to Mr. Parker. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. If you don't know me, I'm the principal of East High School. I'm Jim Parker. Ms. Pearson, thanks for having me here tonight. Dr. Jarrett, thank you, thank you. I appreciate being able to present what we're doing here, and the school board also. You know, it just started, Earl and I were just sitting around talking one day, and you know, I said, well, you know, we talk, okay, and I said, you know, I said, these schools are really the community schools more so than just my school. And I said, I need to draw something to bring the community in some more. I mean, yeah, we have school report cards, we got standards of practice, but we also have to have engaged community members. And he said, you know what, Jim? He said, I got some people I want you to talk to. So he introduced me to Dante and Sheila, and we started to run some ideas through our head. And one of the things that's near and dear to me, and Aaron and I talk about this a lot, is I have to find a balance between the academy model, educational model, and the community. And so we started talking about how we can bring in mentors, site visits. It started also with Danielle going out and setting up site visits for our students to go out into the community and to bring the real world in. And then Dante and Sheila, we hit it off, and Dante reminded me, I told him a little bit of my brother, a guy who, you know, did okay in high school, and next thing you know, he owns his own business. And next thing you know, he's employing people in this town. Next thing you know, he's giving back to this town. So what we decided, this isn't about changing curriculum. This isn't about maybe even reinventing the wheel. This might be something older than time, really, about bringing the community in and bringing them to be a part of the school. So as always, I'm going to say my little bit what I did, but I'm going to bring these individuals in with Danielle, and I'm going to let them actually explain what we're doing. But we're trying to incorporate this into our VEI classes in the business department, our incubator, all academies, the freshman academy, put it into Refresh. Dr. Jarrett and I have talked quite a bit about how we can get these 8th graders engaged coming from the 8th to the 9th grade. And also Ms. Lawrence and I have talked quite a bit about this. And putting the production academy, which got model status last year, in the freshman academy, which is going to get model status this year. So hopefully we end up 5 in the next 3 years as we move forward with this. But our biggest thing here, and I went out to, we had a robot thing today out at Jefferson, our extension room, the Votech Center. Well, I guess maybe you don't know what Votech is, but the old Votech Center out at Jefferson. I guess I've been around a while. But from there, and I'm just amazed that when we get our kids out there, and I mean, they got these robots and all these things, and everybody's having a good time. And I think, you know, this is actually a skill that they're going to get a job someday. So I started thinking about Dante again. It's like, well, Dante owns a machine shop. They have to have gears, don't they? Bearings, and all these other things that they're using. So I just think it's very important to what we do to tie the business community, the internships we have, into what we have in the classroom. Might have made me know more about what I want to do with my future when I got out of high school if I'd have had more like this. So I'm going to pass this off to Ms. Sheila here, and she's going to talk a little bit about a PowerPoint she has. And, of course, Danielle Bruja and Dante are going to pipe in. But we just want to give you a little 10-minute overview of what we're trying to accomplish as we move forward. And this isn't something we're jumping into, like, okay, we're going to start at 100% tomorrow. No. This is something that we're going to have a little patience and a little time over it. We're going to see where it gets us. So with further ado, Ms. Sheila. There you go.
Thank you, Jim. Good evening. Thank you so much, Jim. I really appreciate the introduction. Great job at explaining what our intent is. And to all of you, thank you for having me on this evening. You want me to move this and do something? Oh, you want me to control the PowerPoint? Okay, I could do that. So thank you all for having me on this evening. I can really appreciate Jim speaking to Votech because that's what we used to call it. Once again, my name is Sheila Hill, and my the co-founder of Think Big is Dante Matthews. Him and I both are alumni of Rockford East High School. So we're super excited to launch this initiative with the staff there at Rockford East High School. So we're gonna go ahead and get started, and I'm pointing this direction maybe? Oh, great, okay, wonderful. Okay, so what I did was I just really took some quick takeaways pertaining to Think Big. So what you see here is actually a slide to let you know that Think Big, what we're all about is helping entrepreneurs do three things. One is either start their business, sustain their business, or scale up their business. Our ultimate goal is to remove any barriers that minority or women that's in business or choose to go into business may be hindering them or preventing them from starting their business. So what Think Big does is we step in and we remove all those barriers they may be faced with. Why? Because Dante and I both are entrepreneurs, and we faced barriers when we started our business approximately 20 years ago. What you see here is some of Think Big signature events. Think Big actually started with the Think Big Expo. Since then, we've been most known for the School of Business. It's a 4-week program where we teach individuals how to start, sustain, and grow their business. We also have a one-on-one coaching that each person that completes the 4 weeks of the School of Business and decide they're going to move forward and start a business, they also get an opportunity to be coached by another business coach one-on-one for 5 hours. Our latest endeavor is the business crawl. We love that because we get to showcase all the entrepreneurs that went through the School of Business, but we also highlight the businesses in the community as well, not just the ones that completed the School of Business and graduated or went through the school or went to Think Big for assistance or help. We also showcase anyone else that's minority or women that have a business. Starting next month, we're going to have a Think Big Plus Women Conference. One of our funders asked us to do something that was geared directly towards women. So it's going to be a conference where we come in and we talk about 2 women, everyday obstacles they may be faced in starting their business. The women that already have their business, we're going to talk to them about how to grow their business. Of course, we're going to have some people there that's going to speak to our community leaders or anyone that's deciding maybe they have a cushion job, maybe they are EDs, maybe they are executive director somewhere and they decide they want to start their own business. We want to be able to help them make that transition. And then lastly, we just offer one-on-one business workshops and networking events. All right, that's Think Big. So let's talk about, man, I did that on purpose. That L is white on purpose. Anyways, so let's talk about the partnership with East High School, right? As I stated earlier, Dante and I both are alumni of East High School, and so we're excited to be back there to talk to some of the future entrepreneurs in our community. So what we're going to do is this summer we hope to do with Danielle and with, I was going to call you Mike. Mr. Parker. What we're going to do with Jim, Mr. Parker on this summer and some of the incoming students is we're going to take some business topics. We're going to discuss them with the students. We're going to bring in a speaker, and perhaps it's going to be a person that graduated from the School of Business or an entrepreneur in our community that Dante and I have forged a relationship with. And then we're going to offer the students an activity. At the end, we're going to introduce them or allow them to do something what we call the Think Big Pitch Competition, where they get to launch their event, launch their business in front of Dante and I and possibly Earl, and of course, Mr. Parker and Danielle. And then the last thing is we want to have a graduation to celebrate their successes from over the summer. I gave you an idea here of what session 1 would possibly look like. It's real simple. It's very straightforward. We're going to introduce them to entrepreneurship. That's the first thing we're going to do in the first week, the first session. We're going to tell them everything about entrepreneurship, and then we might have a speaker. I might be the speaker. Dante might be the speaker, but we're going to always have a speaker. And then as you can see here, every single session will have some type of activity. So here we're talking about defining entrepreneurship. Then we want them to list maybe 5 local entrepreneurs they may know or 5 business owners they may know in the community. And then we want them to identify what are 5 qualities that's needed to be an entrepreneur or a business owner. And then lastly, the actual activity, the action steps would be creating a vision board or some type of photo array of what do it look like to start a business. That's what session 1 will look like. Let's talk about what session 4 perhaps might look like. We found from studies that we've done with Think Big, we're working with some of our own alumni, we found that marketing and branding is probably one of the most difficult things for a business owner to do. We all know we need to be marketed, we need to be branded. I noticed on your slide, you even mentioned branding on your slide, right? So we all know that's important. So we're gonna talk to the students about marketing and branding their business, but we can't do that until they better understand how can they market and brand themselves as a student. So of course, we're going to talk about what do an A student look like? Okay, What do a D student look like? How can we transition that so that you can look more like an A student versus a D student? It's all about your brand, how you want to be perceived, how you want to be looked upon. We know that it don't happen overnight. It might be a little challenging, but we want to be able to help them do that as well. We might do that by presenting them with some opportunities to lead, to partake in some of our sessions, okay? And then so we might have a speaker. The speaker, for instance here, only for presentation purposes only, we might ask Mercedes Joyner to come in, who has a strategic consulting firm that does marketing and branding. And as you can see, the activity would be list 10 brand logos such as McDonald's, maybe Beefaroo, maybe Farm and Fleet, right? And then once again, they'll create a collage of logos, and they get to pick, you know, the top 5 and explain what those logos look like. And then they can also create their own logo at the end of the class or the end of the session. All right, that's it. Any questions? You know, it's hard to, 10 minutes. He took 5 and I got 3 and I still got 2 more people. So I'm gonna ask Dante to come stand with me. So if you have any questions about Think Big, and I think we're gonna turn it over to Danielle when we're done. No questions?
Sorry, Ms. McCall.
Oh, I was on big now. Okay, thank you. Thank you for coming to present today. My first question is, how many students are you projected to attend this summer camp? How long and how many hours per day? Because you had a big, for like the sessions, is it, just explain a little more breakdown of what that will look like and how many students?
Well, we're working on some of the schematics and the numbers. I don't really even know, to answer your question, what the capacity could be. I do know that as I was talking to Aaron and Jen about this, we have this refresh opportunity, which is a great concept, but I have to fine tune it a little bit to make myself happy. And I hope that makes the other people happy. And so that number could be as big as what I get from the need from the 8th grade. So to put a capacity on it, I wouldn't. But I mean, to start it off, if I can get 30 to 50 kids into something like this, I would be very pleased. And then we can tie it in. We have a careers class with that. We have a math class. We have an English class. And then we toyed with a little idea of what would be an ancillary thing. And we're thinking about, well, they're coming into the career academies. They're coming into a careers class. Let's bring this mentorship into these children that are coming up. And this group that we're targeting is, I don't know if at risk is the right word, but it's students that have struggled in the middle school, and we want to make sure they get a step up as we go into the high school. But that's only a start. I don't really know where this takes us. I hope it takes us somewhere really where we want to go, but I don't want to actually like say, oh, I got it all figured out, because I don't think I ever do. But we're getting it going on that.
Okay, so I guess my question should have been, is this separate during the summer? Because during your explanation, you kind of sound like you're going to trickle off into the school year, or what? Can I get a better definition?
That's actually a very good question. It's going to start in the summer because we've been planning, and then we're going to trickle into the school year with these kids through their career academies freshmen. Actually, that's an absolute great question, because that was what ran through our mind, was where do we start? And remember, Dante, we were talking about that. It's like, do we start with the seniors? Do we start where? So we're thinking that a good starting point with this is going to be the freshmen. And I think, Sheila, didn't you talk about actually carrying it through for 4 years? Was something that we really thought about. But yes, if we stop it at summer, then it's over. I mean, we want to make sure we carry that through.
So when you say carry it through, you mean 4 summers? 4 consecutive summers, or is it the same group that's going on? I just need to. Yeah.
I'm Danielle Bruja. I'm the academy coach at East, and I kind of have those more specifics. Yeah. So the things that I see where this partnership will fit, we've got our VEI path, the business pathway, the entrepreneurship pathway. It completely works with that pathway. We already have the VEI International. Where I see them fitting is they can be, the members of the community can come in and they can help us with differentiated instruction, because Virtual Enterprise International, which is VEI, your class is your business. So what I see happening is having people from Think Big come in as mentors, and then you have your HR department, your business and marketing department, your payroll, and like all those little departments that you have in your class, and they would be led by a community member. So they would make it a real life lesson what their experience is in our community. And then with Incubator, they could act as our mentors as well, and that's the level of the senior year level of the Pathway 3 class, and they can assist with our Shark Tank event It also, when the kids coming in from 8th grade into 9th grade, it kind of gives them an idea of business. So it might veer them towards the business academy, which would be really great to get our numbers up over there too. All academies, like Mr. Parker did say, they can help us out with getting sophomore site visits, which was one of our CCR benchmarks. The freshman academy, it will be really great during the CCR classes, the college and career readiness classes, to get guest speakers in to talk about the different types of businesses and occupations out in the community. Production academy, our engineering teacher, she has this really great idea. The kids like to pick their teams by their friends, and they're finding out that their friends don't always support them as well as they would like. So instead of doing that, they'll have every big project that they do, like today's Bot Blitz, for example, where they were building their robots, and they're gonna have it as like a business. So that their business is gonna go through the year or through the project, and they're gonna have the person in charge, and they're gonna hire, and they might have to fire somebody through the business, and at the end they would do like a business report, an expense report, the time and everything, and that is gonna be a key thing that Think Big is gonna come in and help us out with there. Because our engineering teacher does not have any business experience, but she thinks that would be really cool to see how a real life experience, like this is how it is in the business world, where if you're not holding up your end of the bargain, you could get fired. So that will be a really cool thing. And then at the end of the project, they'll dissolve the business and start a new one. And then just basically like for what I see is working with any of our community members to help support our students is completely positive, and it helps illustrate all the cool things going on in our community, and it helps illustrate that especially these guys over here who are alumni, they walk those same halls and look where they are. They're super successful and super fun to work with, and our students have such a great experience with those stories, and then they might be able to see themselves out in our community and working and want to give back too. And I think that there are so many different unique opportunities out there, and our Think Big partners will bring us some valuable perspectives and mentorships for all of our community academies. So I don't necessarily have an exact answer for you, but just like the gentleman I rode the elevator up with, my brain never turns off, and I already talked to him, gave him my business card, and I will keep this going as long as I work for the Rockford Public Schools. So the sky is the limit.
Okay, so I'm getting a better picture now. So your collaboration with Think Big will help you provide mentorship throughout your academies and everything. I'm speaking more towards the summer camp portion. So the summer camp portion is going to be East High School students, right? Any grades, whatever. They're going to go through these sessions, and they're going to, you said you guys are trying to figure out how to incorporate what happens in the summer camp towards their regular academic aspirations as well. So will they be receiving any type of credit hours? It just seems like, I know it's two things we're talking about, right?
Yeah, well, the credit hour piece, Ms. Lawrence and I have been working on with the career part. We have a credit in the refresh program, but we haven't really got deep with exactly how we're going to do all of this. I don't really see it being credit bearing completely for what we're doing in the summer school, the refresh, but I do see it being a jump start to being credit bearing as they go into the fall, into the spring.
Okay, and we're looking to start this upcoming summer.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we'll have all those answers.
I'll have more for you. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. I'll have more for you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Ms. Pearson,
Yes.
did you have a question?
I'm going to let Paul
Okay, go ahead.
go first.
Thank you. That's very interesting and sounds great. And I was just wondering if there's anything that we can do to help you with this project.
Keep asking me questions. I mean, that helps me out a lot because it gets me thinking. As Danielle said, as we come up in the elevator, I mean, not one of us has all the ideas. So this is refreshing to have people reflect on things that I'm doing where there may be gaps or errors or losses that I can go forward with. So I appreciate it, Paul. I do think that, I think we're onto something, well, I hate to say big because it's Think Big, but I think we're onto something. I think we're really onto something here. I mean, as a person in the community, Rockford Public School graduate, I think that these type of things are important because at the end of the day, my dad told me this, and one time he said, you know, nobody works for free. I mean, we might volunteer this and that, but you got to do something in this world to get yourself figured out. And getting the mentorship of people coming in can hopefully help these kids find something they want to do. I mean, to be engaged in what they want to do.
First of all, Mr. Parker, thank you. I've had opportunity to visit your school and have conversation with you, and I've observed you take a special interest in making sure that children that are faced with circumstances is successful. And I appreciate you having hands-on and being connected to your students in that way. To Think Big, co-founders, Dr. Sheila Hill and Mr. Matthews, thank you very much for collaborating with RPS 205. As we listen to community, we hear the need for role models. Oh my goodness, specifically, childhood issue, specifically African-American role models. And I see opportunity, and I've always said we need to have more innovative ways in teaching our scholars and giving them an experience in the educational program. So, having said all that, I always want to get to the bottom line, and how are we going to pay for this? Would this be coming from your discretionary dollars? Is it something that we are looking to cover in our budget? If so, that's another conversation. And to speak to the summer piece, I think that as we still have other board meetings that we're going to have, and I'm sure the refresh program is going to come up, and I see opportunity here for students to participate in the refresh program, as well as having that mentorship available. If scholars can think bigger, I'm gonna say that again. If scholars can think bigger of themselves, they will produce bigger. So I see so much opportunity here. And of course, I'm interested in working out specifically the finances of it, because we have to be prepared to answer questions, because we won't have the extra money that we once had, right? So if this program is coming in one school, how are we gonna support programs that we had to discontinue? So I am in full support of Think Big, collaborating with East High School. It's my understanding that this is a pilot, correct?
Correct.
So that takes time to work out, and I look forward to having, positive outcomes from this. But I definitely want answers, Dr. Brown, and how this will happen. If it's discretionary dollars, it's discretionary dollars. If it's going to affect the budget and other programs that we can have in schools, then of course we need to take a closer look at how we can make this happen. I am sure that we can find a win-win.
I think, Ms. Pearson, first of all, I want to thank you for bringing that up. I actually thought about this quite a bit, and I don't even know if the impact is even significant on our budget is what we would really think, because refresh is already in my budget through Title I funding, and all the other schools have it. Dante and Sheila, by the grace of their heart, blessing of God here, aren't charging me these crazy amount of dollars. They volunteered their time up to this point. There's going to be money that's going to go out to pay for things, but it's not an enormous amount of money from the aspect where it's going to take away from other programs. So the money that will go out will be money that I've earmarked for this type of thing. And when we work it into the classrooms, we're actually working it into classrooms where teachers were already been paid out of Fund 10 or Fund 17, depending on, or 18, whichever one that is of the three. I guess I keep going with the numbers. But I won't be bringing in more FTEs to bring this program in. It's actually a balance of efficiency, I think, because we're bringing in what we have and we're utilizing the community members from the outside. So I think I can make it work. I can put some numbers together for you where it comes out. Dr. Brown and I can sit down. We have a good working relationship. And as we get closer to the implementation stage, we can have some numbers for you.
Absolutely. That is wonderful. That's all I ask. I think that as a community, put the pressure on RPS 205 to produce those ready for the workforce. Again, I see this being a huge opportunity, and I definitely appreciate the conversation and you willing to pilot this. Dr. Hill, Mr. Matthews, thank you so much for what you are willing to contribute and give back to our community. Board Member Paul already, Mr. Carpenter already asked if we could be of assistance. Let us know, and I look forward to hear more about it.
Ms. Pearson, you're always welcome to stop on over randomly, and we can talk about this as we've done in the past. Come on over and we can sit down and talk about it.
Gladly.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Anyone else have any questions or comments? He's got my clicker. Okay, just a few more items. The YMCA Black Achievers Brunch was held on Saturday, February 24th at the Lenox on North Cherryvale Mall Drive with the theme of providing Black excellence a seat at the table. A seat at the table is an excerpt from prolific poet Langston Hughes' I Too, denoting the idea that all people can sit at one table together to eat and work to eradicate deep divisions that once existed. RPS attendees and other community friends dined with the common goal of Black youth achievement. Guests were treated to wonderful stories of the history of the organization, great speakers and testimonies from youth who shared how they have benefited from being part of the organization. NAACP Black History Month program was held February 22nd at the Coronado Performing Arts Center. The event showcased a diversity of talents that included performances in art, dance, music, and poetry. The featured guest speaker was Mr. Bradley Ross Jackson, who is the NAACP Illinois State Conference Youth and College President. Many RPS students, staff, and school district parents attended and participated in the event. Our next coffee chats will feature Board President Denise Pearson and Board Vice President Tiana McCall. The day is Tuesday, March 12th from 6 to 7:30 p.m. at the Geisy Jenkins Community Resource Center, 911 Michigan Avenue. We look forward to another great conversation with our community. We finish our deck with the board calendar, reminding board members of the many opportunities available to interact with our students, families, and community each month. Make sure you check out the calendar on a regular basis. And now, if any board member has anything they'd like to share regarding any school events you've attended or any interactions you've had in the community. Anyone? Ms. McCall.
I just want to say that in an upcoming board meeting, hopefully, if Madam President allows, I would like to present reflections on the conference that we attended, the National School Board Member Association Conference we attended last month in Dallas, Texas. So it was a very great, eye-opening conference, and I would love to share my thoughts with the board members, my fellow board members, as well as the community. That's the first thing. Secondly, I've attended, it feels like, so many events dealing with the Rockford Public Schools this past month. I just love to compliment everybody for all of the activities that you guys are producing at each individual schools and inviting us to come and try to, get a deeper dive or deeper feeling on how teachers are interacting with students, students interacting with principals. When you walk into school, they don't know who you are. Kids don't know who you are or whatever, but you get a true sense of how that school is functioning, just based on walking the hallways. Let me see what else. And that's it.
Thank you. Anyone else? Ms. Pearson?
So I have so much interaction with the public via telephone. But I just want to put this plug in. I had a parent reach out to me, and she was really concerned about suspension rate and made some suggestions on what she was going to do to bring attention to the matter. So I thought this would be a good opportunity to help parents understand. Number one, you have a responsibility to know the student code of conduct. That's the first thing you want to know, the student code of conduct. Please understand that there is a proper chain of command in solving a problem. And there's multiple ways that you can communicate with RPS 205. Unfortunately, school staff cannot tell you why students were suspended. Neither can I. So when your student come home, the scholars come home, and they share, you have the school counselor, you have the assistant principal, there's a complete line of communication, and I would encourage you to take advantage of that, because sometimes we speak on a matter and then later find out that it was more to it than we are aware of. So it's absolutely important that you understand that there are laws that RPS 205 is mandated by, and one word you can always ask is restorative justice. Most, I'm sure, school personnel understand what that term means, and they'll be happy to explain how that process looks. So, again, refer to your student code of conduct. If you need help understanding the student code of conduct, reach out to your school. Again, there's counselors, assistant principal, there's Let's Talk. So you can speak at school board meetings. There's so much that you can do to directly be engaged in what goes on in the day-to-day school and there's activities at school and what plays into leading up to a suspension. Of course, that's not something, or should definitely not be the first go-to. There's things that will escalate to that. So I just want to pause because I get a lot of inquiries about that, and I certainly hope that our school teams are making sure that parents fully understand and is offering restorative justice and help turning around behaviors so that child can be successful. Some things is completely out of our hands. As much as we would like for every single student to stay in the school, I had to explain, for an example, a fight just seemed like it's a fight because that's what kids do. But it takes staff to break up the fight. It disrupts learning, breaking up a fight. So there's many things that come into play. So when we look at numbers or parent numbers or you're having conversation, just look at the whole picture, and wherever we can support, of course we want to do that. Thank you.
Anyone else? That concludes our report.
Thank you, Ms. Stafford. Mr. Carpenter will now lead the Performance and Monitoring Committee portion of the meeting.
Thank you. Tonight we have one item for discussion. Ms. Lawrence will update us on the proposed revisions to the Student Code of Conduct and the process used to gather feedback from the various stakeholders.
Good evening. I'm Jen Lawrence, Chief of Student Services. I have Dave Graffey, Director of Student Services here. He'll present part of this presentation. I just wanted to remind everyone that this is not the right presentation. This is not the slides. There it is. That's better. I just wanted to remind the board, some of you were on the board at the time that we revised the Code of Conduct in the spring of 2022 and implemented it starting in the school year 22-23. So this is the second full year of the implementation of this revised Student Code of Conduct. And I also wanted to kind of let you know that the major revisions there were about 3 major revisions. One was to consolidate and to group similar offenses into 5 categories. So we have 5 different matrices that we look at for the Code of Conduct. The other one was to reduce the allowable number of suspension days throughout the Code of Conduct at each level. And also we differentiated the discipline by egregiousness and number of incidents, so it's progressive in nature. This presentation, we're going to kind of break this up into sections and then allow for discussion and questions throughout so that we don't wait until the end because, as I was told, there's 42 slides. So we have the three major sections, and really what you're going to hear is what did we hear as we go through this presentation, and what are we going to do about it, really. One thing that I'm very proud of over the last year and a half is the number of sessions that we've had with our stakeholder groups, and those are really listening sessions. Our parent advisor is a little different. We do get into some very deep discussions about student data, which is very important, as you'll see in the next slides with student discipline numbers. But we hosted 36 different sessions so far this school year, and we had 2 staff surveys. The staff surveys were new, and we got a lot of feedback from these sessions. The themes were fairly similar throughout the stakeholder groups. Implementation was one, how that code is implemented across our district, fair and equitably. The training that leads into the Student Code of Conduct, specifically training for our school staff, not our school administrators, our teachers, our teachers. We do have training for students. And then the accountability for students, and then also the accountability on the implementation side. So are there any questions on any of the listening sessions? Do you have any feedback or questions on that?
Do you by any chance know have a total of participants for the listening sessions we've had so far?
I can get that for you, for sure. We do have it. We have sign-in sheets, so yes. I don't have it with me.
No worries. And do you recall if there was much engagement from the public?
Correct. Yes, there was. There was quite lengthy discussion for our our community listening events at East and Auburn High School. We were in-depth conversation. We ran overtime at both of those sessions. Our parent advisories are a 2-hour event, either every month or every other month, depending on, sometimes a holiday falls right in there, unfortunately, and we have to skip a month. Our student listening sessions, there wasn't a lot of necessarily back and forth, but we listened and heard their perspective. And then the staff survey was really just through the survey, them letting us know what they felt.
Thank you.
So on discipline.
I had a question as well. Along the same lines as Madam President, did you guys notice that this round of listening sessions, were they more attended than the last round last year when you were first doing it? I'm just trying to see if, the parents were more reactive or proactive to these changes.
I would say it was fairly similar, probably a better turnout at East High School. It just lends us, gives us feedback and information that maybe this isn't the right way to do this throughout the school year, and that potentially we're maybe looking at a quadrant model for feedback so that we host something throughout the school year as in the quadrant model to get feedback, better feedback, instead of waiting until, a one-time event.
Okay, thank you.
But we do, I'm just going to shameless plug here, in the Code of Conduct, there is a way for parents and community members to be involved in the advisory committee, and that's on the first page of the inside of the book of the Code of Conduct. Okay, discipline trends. Some of this information is going to be difficult. And some of this information is going to be positive. We've got some really good positive trends going, and we have some trends that need some direct attention and support for students. So I just kind of want to go through this. This is one of our better slides. When you look at something like this, when we talk about the student code of conduct, we generally talk about students that are violating the code of conduct at level 4. They're our most egregious level in the code. And when you look at this, 86% of our students really don't violate the student code of conduct. And those are really tremendous results. So what schools are doing to prevent discipline is working for 86% of the students in our schools. So I just want to kind of like let that sit for a second. The next 3 slides I'd like to talk about together and separately. So these are slides that give us a roadmap to where we need to move in the future in terms of interventions for students and how we train staff, how we train students, and some of the interventions that we target in terms of the populations that are going to be identified in the next few slides. So in this slide, you can see that this is also for level 4, that the majority of our level 4 incidents are students of color. The next slide, the majority of our incidents look like they start ramping up starting in grade 6 and escalate. The largest number is in grade 9. Now remember, grade 9 in this data is also repeat freshmen. So students that have not earned enough credits to move to grade 10 are in that grade 9 data. But that's still a very significant jump in number for us to identify and pay attention to. And again, we have very specific information for us as a district. Our males are violating the code of conduct at a larger percent than our females. And I would like to say, Mr. Graffey is going to go over this slide, but I will say, you know, in our conversations with our parent advisory, we really dug into a lot of this data, those 3 slides in particular. And while we don't believe that it's a language in the code of conduct issue, meaning like the description of the code violation or the offense, where we feel like we need additional attention is in our practice. So the practice of identifying students who are at risk or have had previous discipline or behavioral issues, and then 2, providing the right intervention or matching that intervention to what the student needs. That's where we feel like the next set of work, we really need to double down. Student services, the schools team, and our MTSS team.
All right, good evening. Again, my name is David Graffey. I am the Director of Student Services. To further break down the 388 students at level 4, this slide here indicates our most prevalent level 4 violations. As we could see here, our 3 top ones of group violence, repeated level 3 behaviors, and staff battery all come out of our physical aggression matrix. So again, we know that that's going to be something that we have to continue to monitor and work with our schools to put initiatives into our buildings to better support our students, to hopefully prevent some of these physically aggressive behaviors from occurring. This slide here shows positive trends both for our out-of-school suspension data as well as our in-school suspension data. But for tonight's focus, we're going to look at the chart on the left. On this chart here, we could see that the number of students and days for out-of-school suspension is drastically reduced. Again, the last year of the previous code of conduct was the 21 to 22 school year, and the first year of the revised code of conduct was 22 to 23. In the same interval, we could see a reduction of 7,700 days of out-of-school suspension after we made the revisions to the code of conduct. And also, not just the number of days that students are being out of school suspended, but the number of students, with a reduction of 611 students. So I think that goes to speak to the changes within the code of conduct, but also the interventions that are being done in school. I know Board President Pearson mentioned restorative justice and restorative practices earlier. So I think having more of those types of things are helping us out with out of school suspension. Mrs. Lawrence looked at our demographic information where we identified that our students of color are receiving a large portion of the level 4 discipline. These next 2 charts on in-school suspension and out-of-school suspension are for all students at levels 2 and 3 and 4. So in this case here, you can see on the left-hand side what our demographics breakdown is for race based on our active enrollment. And then on the right-hand side of these next two slides, you can see what the incident percentage rate is for students within those same demographics. So again, this is nothing new. This is what we saw on the previous slides. Our students of color are making up a higher percentage of both our in-school suspended students as well as our out-of-school suspended students.
I'm sorry, did you say that the numbers decreased?
No. So the numbers that Mrs. Lawrence looked, the out-of-school suspension days, yes, those did. Sorry. So I know there's a lot of information on this slide, and I'm going to help break it down for everybody. So RPS 205 has been identified as one of the top 20% when it comes to districts in the state of Illinois as far as out-of-school suspension is used. So we are highlighted in the yellow section there. The other 5 districts are Chicago Public Schools 299, Elgin District 46, we're number 3, Indian Prairie School District is number 4, and then Plainfield is number 5. So as you can see in here, 4 out of the last 5 years, we have been indicated in the top 20% for out-of-school suspension rate. So while we are still on this list, we are moving in the right direction. 2 years ago, we suspended at an out-of-school suspension rate of 25. Last year, we dropped that 6 points to 19, and this year we are projecting a decline even further than that. So again, we are moving in the right direction, but we are still on that list as of right now. At this point in time, we're going to pause again for any questions, comments, or feedback from the board.
Okay. Oh, sorry. So that chart is top 5 of total number of suspensions, correct?
So this chart here is the top 5 largest districts in the state of Illinois based on student enrollment. So just so you can kind of see a side-by-side picture of where we compare to some of the other districts that are similar in size and demographics to us.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
And then towards the middle, there's, for instance, the expulsions and expulsion rate, correct?
That's correct. So this chart here does present information for suspensions, expulsions, and disproportionality. Our focus today is on the out-of-school suspension numbers because that is the plan that we are on with the state of Illinois, ISBE. So while we indicate on here that we do have some higher numbers, we are not in the top 20% when it comes to expulsion rate or disproportionality.
Okay, so then looking at suspensions, I guess. So suspensions, 2023, Rockford is 5,300. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. And then Elgin is 2,500. Indian Prairie is 750, and Plainfield's 1,000.
Correct.
Okay. And just moving over to the expulsion, since it's on here, do those districts?
Mm-hmm. So the business rules for the expulsions is if a district expels fewer than 10 students over the course of a school year, their data will report as 0 on this report. So each of those districts that is showing 0 would have 10 or fewer expulsions over the course of that school year.
Thank you.
Yep.
So in regards to the, how many of the students that were suspended had any, were there ever a part of the Handle with Care? Were there ever any alerts on any of those students?
Yes, so in Panorama, we do document our Handle with Care alerts as well as the Handle with Care follow-ups. So if a social worker, counselor, somebody like that met with the student after a Handle with Care alert, that would all be documented in Panorama. I don't have the specific numbers in front of me, however.
In terms of data for those students, we can get that to you as well. We could pull that. It may take a few days, but we could pull that information.
Okay, so I'm most interested in the students that were flagged to Handle with Care. Mm-hmm. Let me, so for an example, student B may have gotten an alert that to Handle with Care. Prior to getting that alert, they've had previous infractions that could ultimately escalate to a suspension. How so if they're on the Handle with Care alert, will you reset the process of restorative justice, or offering additional help?
Yeah.
Because I just feel that if they're on the alert once, then there could be other circumstances where it may not show up as an alert. So is it just a one-time alert, or are we handling that student with care over the process of time?
So the answer to that is it is a one-time alert unless it happens again. It is documented in Panorama. When that happens, that should trigger an MTSS conversation with the school team. And so if that student needs additional support, that would be triggered at that time. Now, if the student has behavioral issues, that should be a discussion with the MTSS team at the school to determine additional needs for the student. Because we know a one-time event doesn't mean that it's a one-time,
Exactly.
right, for the student. So even if something happens a week later or 2 weeks later, that information is still relevant when we talk about student discipline. And when administrators give student discipline, they have to go through the Robinson factors, which part of that is the conditions that the student is under, right? So their academic concerns, any social emotional concerns, and so forth.
Okay, thank you.
So along, excuse me, along those lines, I'm curious to know what type of interventions were put in. If they're alerted and you do all those other steps, are there interventions that could possibly stop, the progression or catch it before it gets to suspension and all that?
Well, as a former behavior disorder, emotionally disturbed teacher, yes, there are things that you can do to intersect between student misbehavior and recidivism.
No, I'm saying, is that happening?
That is up to the school's MTSS team.
Oh.
Yes. So they're at the levels of the code of conduct, and we'll get into part of that later. At level 3 currently, an intervention plan must be created. At level 2, we suggest one to be created. As you'll see later in the presentation, we're shifting that to be earlier in the code.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yes.
Did I answer your question?
You're really close.
Close.
Yeah.
And just real quick, so when we're looking at the out-of-school suspension days, that's up until 2/16/24, so that number will increase by the end of the year?
That's correct.
Yes.
Okay.
And just as a follow-up for Handle with Care, we did get an update, a supers update X amount of time ago, 30 days ago, sometime in the past month, about kind of the next phase of Handle with Care. So like all the implementation, all of the different interventions to go into place for Handle with Care notices. And then unfortunately, if a child has a Handle with Care notice and then they are a child that we review a packet for, all of the interventions that were done are also documented for us too. So just a reminder.
Just real quick, following up on the data that's through February, or do you know how many days of the school year have gone through that date? You know what I mean? Like what percentage of the school year has passed?
How many months?
Yeah, I want to say it's right around 60% of the school year.
Thanks.
So I'm going to let you, as I know you have a lot of ground to cover, but I want to make sure that we have more discussion on the MTSS and the BIS and how we're going to, if there's changes, how we're going to really address the needs where it relates to behavior. So I'm going to put a pin in it for now and try to let you get through as much as we can.
Absolutely, thank you. So the next section that we're going to review tonight will be the proposed changes. So again, as Ms. Lawrence stated at the beginning, there are 3 main sections. So again, we'll pause after each one of those sections to allow for board member feedback. The first section that we want to address is the parts of the Student Code of Conduct. The Illinois State Board of Education does provide us with a checklist of mandatory requirements that must be in every school district's code of conduct. This was something that we reviewed with our parent advisory to ensure that we are in compliance with all of the state requirements. One thing that we do want to make a change for in the first section of the Code of Conduct is as it relates to our bullying policies. One of the things that we are going to be updating is the complaint manager. So who do those bullying complaints get escalated to? So we are going to be updating that with our Chief of Schools, Morgan Gallagher, as well as including all of the required information for his contact. I know that recently the school district is moving away from our Let's Talk for moving forward, so we are going to be updating that language as well and removing that from the Code of Conduct. Currently, we have the pictures on your left is posters that if you've been in our buildings, you've probably seen up as you're walking through the hallways. That is our See Something, Say Something, where students or staff can report something that is going on within their building, whether that be bullying, weapons, drugs, abuse, those types of things. And unfortunately, that's more of a reactive side. So one of the things that we really want to focus on is more of a proactive approach, where students that are experiencing those types of things themselves can reach out through a needs help poster, which will go directly to an email address that is monitored by counselors, social workers, other support staff, and administrators that can get to that student and provide feedback and support immediately, so that they can establish with a trusted adult within their building.
And both of those posters will be displayed in our schools this fall.
Any questions on proposed changes in the first section of the Code of Conduct? No? Okay. The next section that we will review is the discipline matrices. So in this section, we'll be looking at the actual offense code violation definitions, as well as any proposed changes to interventions or corrective strategies. The first slide that we are looking at here is proposed changes to our discrimination or discriminatory conduct level 2 violation. Our proposed change here, if the board accepts it, is to remove the word annoy and instead use the word persistently when it comes to this definition. Another change that we are looking to make for the 24-25 school year is the addition of 2 new codes to incorporate teen dating violence. And again, these code definitions here are differentiated based on the egregiousness at level 3 and 4, based on the type of teen dating violence that occurred, whether that be mental or emotional abuse or physical or sexual abuse. Some feedback that we received from our transportation department is that we wanted to clarify that school property also includes district-owned or contracted vehicles or equipment when it comes to damage that is occurring to our school property. That will occur at both levels 2 and 4. In our harmful materials matrix, we are making a proposed change to the electronic devices. Before it said unauthorized use of a cell phone in any classroom. Some of the feedback that we received said that that policy was not broad enough because it was confined to a classroom environment. However, there are other times where cell phones should not be utilized. So we wanted to clarify that and just have violation of the cell phone policy. For our use of tobacco level 3 violation, we wanted to clarify that this also includes use of tobacco, as it currently just reads repeated level 2 offense, which is currently just a possession of tobacco violation. Our only change in the physical aggression matrix is going to be to our battery, aggravated battery, and staff battery level 4. The definitions themselves are not changing from what is currently in the 22-23 Code of Conduct. However, these are currently listed just under battery, aggravated battery. And just for the ease of the reader, we wanted to separate that into what part of that definition applies to students and what part of that definition applies to staff. And then lastly, our proposed changes regarding interventions and corrective strategies. Mrs. Lawrence touched on this a little bit earlier. As we said, we wanted to shift down the requirements for when students are being put on these behavior intervention plans. In our current Code of Conduct, level 3 and level 4 violations are required to have corresponding behavior intervention plans documented in Panorama. Our proposal, if the board accepts it, is to drop that down to level 2s. So anytime a student has a level 2 violation moving forward, that student will be put on a behavior intervention plan. And then for level 3 and level 4 violations, we are going to require that the behavior coach for that quadrant meet with the MTSS team to have specific conversations about those individual students so they can provide their feedback as well. So again, those are the proposed changes for interventions as well as corrective strategies. Are there any questions on the discipline matrices section of the Code of Conduct?
So this is just one thing. The administration, when putting this together, believes at the building level and the MTSS teams are ready for this. They have the capacity to take this on. You know what I mean? Because I imagine that would be more, you know, that would increase the capacity of their caseloads and planning and all those things if you shift it.
Correct. And when you look at the specific student data for level 2, 3, and 4, the level 2 really would be not as robust of an intervention plan. It could be a group, so where they're just assigning a student to enter into a group. And a tier 3 plan could be an individual or smaller group. So that would be a little bit more robust as we move forward. In terms of their ability to handle the number of students, when Mr. Graffey and I really look and dig into student data for schools, we're not looking at an overwhelming number of students at each school.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I have a few questions. Okay, for, I'm going to ask about teen dating violence. Teen dating violence has student 13 to 19. Is the age 13 chosen because it's based on the age you are in 7th grade tied to the law? Do we know?
So the language for teen dating violence came directly out of the statute. And again, I would assume that teen, meaning the label, starts at 13.
Okay, so, because it, okay, just wanted to clarify. And then ending at 19, even though we can have youth older than 19 in our buildings?
That's a good.
That's good feedback.
Yeah.
Okay, so, because then it would.
I would have to confirm, but I believe, like Mr. Graffey said, it's based off of the statutory language.
And I thought the language was about the, I don't have it with me, but I thought it was about the curriculum portion to provide education to youth starting in 7th grade and up is what the age is, but I could be wrong. So if somebody could look into that, that would be, okay, thank you. And then in that section for teen dating violence.
Ms. Bennett?
Yeah.
Yes, I'm looking at the school code and teen dating violence. It does limit it to where one or both persons are 13 to 19 years of age. That's a statutory language.
Okay, so then it becomes a different instance past 19. Okay. And then, so for physical aggression in the matrix, and then also bullying, intimidation, sexual harassment, verbal abuse, additional options for interventions include anger management and or nonviolent conflict resolution. I had it flagged as something from summertime that we talked about for anger management. Is that something that the schools refer to? I have not heard of them doing that. Do they have a resource to refer for anger management? Do they have a resource to refer for nonviolent conflict resolution?
Through our school social workers potentially, and through our Rosecrans SAPs, our school counselors.
Okay.
I don't have the MTSS data with me.
Okay. Okay. All right, and then in here, so we talked about behavior coaches, which also Ms. Pearson brought up behavior intervention specialists. So the behavior coaches that we're referring to, we're gonna refer to are the coaches over the quadrant, not specific interventionists in the building. Is that accurate?
Correct. We are hoping to continue to push in the supports to the schools. We've seen since the beginning of this school year a marked uptick in the use and the utilization of those particular individuals. So we're kind of doubling down on that intervention, that there are supports outside of that school MTSS team if they cannot come to interventions or figure out what is going on in particular with that student, that they have some outside eyes to come in and do some observations and assist.
Okay, great. And then I think that's my last question on this section. Yep.
I just have a quick question on that, on the damage to property, where it's adding the district-owned or contracted vehicles or equipment, and I understand that that's for mainly, or the transportation requested that in case a contracted bus gets damaged, I guess, correct?
Correct.
But, I don't know, isn't that covered under the private personal property either way? Like, if it's a first student bus that gets damaged, that's private or personal property that's being damaged without the consent.
I think
also,
the way
right?
that the code currently reads, the private or personal property was with respect to specific individuals, not for companies. And so I think that's why they wanted to add the language of district-owned or contracted vehicles. So like if my property was damaged as an individual versus the outside organization.
Yeah, I don't know, I think it already said, and it's not a big deal, but it seems like it already says any property that isn't the students or who didn't consent to it is covered, but, okay, thanks.
Right, and that was a specific request from our transportation department.
All right, moving into our next section of the discipline guidelines. The first change that we are proposing is with regards to the dress code and uniforms found on page 21. The current code reads IDs are required at all times. The proposed change here is to change language to students must provide identification upon request at all times. And the reason for the ask is that at the beginning of the school year or as students are transferring into our district, they may not always have their student ID on them right away. Sometimes it takes a couple weeks to get students their IDs. The basis for this in the code was to be able to quickly identify students as needed. So if a student can provide that student ID, a student ID number, or as our younger kids call it, their lunch number, if we can be able to identify who those students are at a quick case, that was the intent behind that. So that was our proposed change. The next proposed change is as it relates to search and seizure on page 22. We wanted to remove the language and a written report regarding the search shall be provided to the superintendent or designee. That language was not consistent with the current board policy, so we wanted to revise that language so that it is consistent with board policy. The next proposed change is as it relates to videotaping on page 23. We wanted to add the language of, with limited exceptions, the surveillance video will only be shown to parents or guardians pursuant to a hearing officer's decision as part of a discipline hearing. Many of the times, families will come in and request to see the video evidence of their student involved in the misconduct. And up to this point, we've always had to say, you know, there's other students involved, and due to their privacy rights, we can't show that to you. And we've put that in the hands of the hearing officer to determine when or not we're allowed to show that video. One of the requests that we have heard from our stakeholder groups is to be able to investigate whether or not we can obtain some type of software to blur other students' faces out so that we can still maintain that privacy expectation for other students while also showing that. So that is something that we're going to be working with our security services as well as our IT department to try and see if we can obtain something along those lines. The next proposed...
Excuse me, I have a quick question
Yes, ma'am.
regarding the video. So, and perhaps legal can assist me with that. I understand that confidentiality is a concern, no doubt, in terms of showing video footage. But would there still be, even if we're able to obtain software to protect images, is there any statute where would there be a need for a specific policy that would align with being able to allow parents or guardians to view footage?
The definition of a school student record would dictate whether or not the surveillance video that they're asking to view is in fact a student record. So many times we will receive calls or requests to see video of related to an allegation that a parent has heard about from their student, and it may not be their student's student record, because if the district did not rely on it for disciplinary purposes and it's just general surveillance safety video, then it is not their student's student record. And so, for example, if it's a student who was alleged victim of an incident and that student is not subject to discipline, that video in and of itself is not that student's student record. It may be the record of the person who, if there are no other witnesses, no other adult witnesses, and the only thing you have is that video, it may be the student record of that
Of someone
alleged
else.
perpetrator,
Okay,
but not necessarily the student who was victimized.
thank you.
Our next proposed change is on page 26 for out-of-school suspension procedures and procedural safeguards. We inadvertently had language in there regarding overnight suspensions, so we are requesting that be removed. So throughout the code of conduct, we are going to be requesting to change adaptive learning to alternative learning, as adaptive learning carries a special education connotation. And we also wanted to update a title change from executive director to chief. When it comes to involuntary transfer on page 27, we wanted to add language that the student is the sending school's responsibility until after that student has started at their alternative learning site, just clarifying that they need to continue to educate the student until they start at the new site. Transition services to and from alternative learning sites on page 28. We are just making these modifications to be in alignment with the alternative learning sites that will be available for the 24-25 school year. For course credit and graduation, our language inadvertently says the word not. So we want to clarify that students that have the advanced prior permission from the building principal to attend a graduation ceremony, or if it's outlined in their EIA agreement, may do so. Lastly, in this section, we do wanted to provide an update regarding elementary schools, middle schools, and high schools as far as some proposed changes to new alternative education programs. Jen, did you want to say anything about those?
Sure. Elementary schools, we're collaborating with the Regional Office of Education to have a intensive, intentional behavioral program for students K through 5. And we've been working on that for quite some time. We anticipate opening our doors in the fall of 2024. We are on track to do so. At our middle schools and high schools, we're looking to do some internal work with I've already met with the building principals, both at middle school and the high school, to start mapping this out. We already have a Refocus, Reset, Restore program, and the middle school principals requested to sit down and look at that and to make any adjustments as needed based upon what they're seeing in their buildings. And so we're in the midst of that right now. And as far as the high schools, we're doing the same. We're just sitting down together to discuss that manual and determine how it might need to be slightly adjusted to meet their needs in regards to student credit recovery as well as behavior intervention. Any questions on any of that?
Well, can you describe what the current Refocus, Reset, Restore program is?
Absolutely. Constance Lane is, if you ever have a chance to visit Constance Lane, they have the classroom up and running. They've had several students move through the program, and when I say through, meaning they were successful and they were returned to the general education setting with skills, some skills intact, and it's kind of nice to, if you work with Principal Doring, to ask him who some of the students were and ask them their experience in there. It's really positive. So the Refocus, Reset, Restore program is at elementary school, a 21 to 42 day. It's 2 cycles of 21 days where the MTSS team discusses a student who is having significant behavioral concerns and creates a plan for the student to have intentional work inside of that classroom. That can be a full day. It could be a partial day. It's really dependent on the individual child and their needs based on the conversation by the MTSS team. And remember, at Tier 3, parents are required members of that conversation, and so they are part of creating this plan. The student moves through that program as there is an early exit option. So if the student is making extraordinary success and progress, they do have the option of moving out early. They also do have the option of going back partially to classes on a stepped plan. If the student needs additional support, they move into the 42-day cycle. And if we're seeing additional work beyond that, which we have not seen yet this school year, then that's a larger discussion, and that's where my team, the MTSS team, and the schools teams meet with the school to discuss the student and potential other interventions that might be possible for the child. So that's what we're looking at. The middle school and high school, it was a 30 to 60 day. They're a little bit older, might take a little bit more time to change some habitual bad behavior or inappropriate behavior, and that's why we change those guardrails to be a little bit longer in nature. But the gist is really the same. Students have goals, behavioral goals. They get their academic work sent from their actual teacher. Their seat in the classroom is maintained. They're just not sitting in it. They're in another location. And the program is bookend with intentional social emotional support as well as additional push-in based on student needs. So for example, the class might start in the morning with social emotional lessons. They start doing academic work. A student may get pulled for additional one-to-one time with a school support staff, reintegrated back into the classroom, end the day with a social emotional lesson so that we're bookending their day with the support that they might need.
Okay, I have a question on page 22 for search and seizure. Okay, on the right-hand column of the section, it says, when feasible, searches of a student will be conducted by a certified employee or liaison police officer of the same sex as the student outside the view of others in the presence of school administration or adult witnesses. What is the definition of when feasible?
I would say, in my experience as an assistant principal in the district, if that school has a staff member that meets that criteria as far as gender and everything, that would be the person conducting that. The only time I could see that not happening would be if we had an all same gender administrative team at a building. They might have to call in a female security guard or something like that to help conduct a search.
Let me add to that. I think your question really was the when feasible part. Mm-hmm. And so our recommendations and our guidance to our schools is to always conduct those searches in private. Mm-hmm. And so when feasible, meaning if there is an emergency and we have to do a search because of a safety issue and we cannot get the student into a secure location, that may have to happen.
So that would mean it could be somebody of the opposite gender of the student, and it could be not in private. But you're saying only if there was
a real safety, like harm to themselves or others, where potentially a weapon was being recovered. But there was an instance where it would be a weapon.
Okay, and then the next sentence says, parents, guardians shall be notified of the search having taken place as soon as possible in a written report. Well, that part's taken out, but what does shall be notified of the search having taken place as soon as possible? How long of a time period is that?
Yeah, so I would say that's definitely, ideally as soon as the search has been conducted would be the ideal time. I would say at the very latest by the end of that school day. If the student is returning home, that should be the practice. Definitely not any time longer than that.
And parents aren't notified ahead of time before a child is searched?
So they don't have to be. In our code of conduct, it says that administrators can perform these searches to ensure the safety of our schools. The guideline in the student code of conduct is that they just have to be notified that it occurred, but it does not necessarily have to be prior to the search being commenced.
Okay, and then there's nowhere in here that our students, so if it's law enforcement, I know that's later in here, and that's another question I have, but later on, students can decline to have, like to be interviewed by law enforcement, but a search of law enforcement, they cannot decline.
So in the code of conduct, it does specifically say that they can decline the search. However, it may not stop the search.
So they can't decline.
They can verbally decline, but the police officer may search them anyway.
Okay. I'm so uncomfortable with those two sentences. I'll just make a statement that I'm uncomfortable with them. I think they're really gray, and I understand that they're gray for safety, but I'm just gonna, that's my statement about those two. Okay, for the next section, so voluntary reporting surrender of weapons or drugs. We also had a discussion a previous time about students being able to surrender something without getting in trouble, so having the something and then surrendering it. So not necessarily aware of somebody else. I don't know if that falls in here or if that's not a discussion. Does that make sense?
Can you explain that just a little bit more?
Do you know what I'm talking about? Do you remember what I'm talking about?
I think when we initiated the Evolve machines, we had talked about the possibility of having, I don't know, they call them amnesty boxes or something,
Yeah,
I think,
that's
at
what you-
airport. And I think, I don't know if that's what you were referring to.
Yeah, so, because this section talks about students who are aware or of, so knowing of weapons, but I guess the contrary is if they themselves have a weapon and are telling us that they have a weapon or would like to give it to us before it is found, would that fall in this section, or that's?
Yes,
It
that
would?
falls in this section.
Okay,
Yes, students can
okay.
volunteer, they can tell us that they have something, and we work through that with them.
Okay, which would potentially be a different consequence than if we found something, correct?
Correct,
Okay,
potentially a different
okay.
consequence, correct, based on the facts of the investigation.
Okay. One last question I have. Under adaptive learning sites, ILC is out. How come ILC is out?
So over the, I don't know exactly how long we've worked with the Innovative Learning Center, but over the last couple of years, I've been looking at our student performance and student attendance at that location, and we're not satisfied with our results. Students are not earning credits, nor are they attending on a regular basis.
Okay. Sounds good to me. And then can we talk about police notification, or is that going to be in the next section?
Yeah, if you have questions, we'll take those now.
Okay. We had also previously discussed a policy or procedure or some way to outline when students can be put in handcuffs or not. So on page 31, for like the numbered items, it says students shall not be removed from the classroom or common areas of the school by police officers unless emergency exists. Let's see. Yeah, students can refuse to give consent to be searched by police, shall not be left alone with police officers, all that. So we had talked about that, but I didn't know where, if legal, or anybody had a position or what our plan was on how to outline when students can be put in handcuffs or not.
So our general rule and our guidance and our administrative addendum is that is in private, unless it is a safety issue. So if a student has to be arrested in one of our schools, we try to do that in a private location in one of our administrative offices and try to get that student out of the building without being seen by others. There have been times schools have gone on lockdown for that to occur. That hasn't happened this school year, but we do try to keep that privacy in mind.
So I guess I'm talking about instances when a child's not under arrest, but they're being put in handcuffs. So how we outline when that's allowed to happen or versus when it's not allowed to happen.
Yeah, so that would be in the next section, our administrator addendum. So that would be one of those things which wouldn't fall under the code of conduct, but based on the discussion that we have with the school board, if we wanted to look at policy review, that would be something that we put into the administrator addendum of how to interpret the code of conduct.
And I would add to that law enforcement exercises their own discretion with regard to when a person needs to be restrained, right? We are, as administrators, at that point that law enforcement is involved, in some way we're deferring to their authority, that the situation may be beyond our control. So we also, in that same instance, cannot dictate to them how to maintain the safety of the environment.
Okay, so I think further discussion about a policy or something would be important because I think there's multiple things that could be happening at the same time. So if the situation is if a child is being arrested, use of handcuffs makes sense. But if there's a situation and in order to get the situation under control, somebody's just being put in handcuffs, it's kind of like a timeout or a use of, and it's an instance that has happened, so I know you're like shaking your head no, but it is something, that's why I wrote it down. That has happened previous. So I would just like more clarity instead of saying like, well, it's up to discretion. I'm just not comfortable with that. So.
Right, and the school would not be making the recommendation to put the child in handcuffs. That would be the discretion of the police officer or the school resource officer.
still think there should be guidelines on that, that's all.
So this is a very sensitive area, number one. So we have a policy involving restraint. And I don't believe the policy have been reviewed enough or revised. So that's going to come later. But since we're on the subject, I think I understand Mrs. Goldsmith's statement in that because they're police officers, they are under a different, the word I want to use, they don't necessarily abide by the RPS 205 policy, that they have their own policy and procedure. So this is one of the reasons why it is not favorable for police officers to be in our school. As I've stated early on, I believe that our police officers should be or is well-trained for de-escalation where handcuffs should not be used. But that is a different subject at a different table. I get that. But we will address later in regards to the restraint, because I wasn't able to find a administrative procedure. So thinking of specific scenarios that have come up in the past where it relates to for an example, that this is completely hypothetical, what I'm about to say. So if a teacher attempt to restrain a student, but did not follow procedure, and I think this is an area of opportunity for us in terms of administrative procedure. There is a policy regarding restraint, but there should be an administrative regulation, procedure, however you want to look at it, that will indicate how that should occur. Then that would avoid possibly things getting out of hand. So that's another subject, and hopefully through community collaboration and efforts, we can approach situations where handcuffs could be used differently. Because that is your point, Mrs. Bennett? That are you referring that handcuffs should never be used, or what is your main concern with the usage of handcuffs?
So law enforcement are inside RPS schools based on a contract and a MOU they have with the district. So they are not employees of RPS, but they are contracted people inside the buildings. So I feel it is within our scope to say we would have a policy and procedure on some of this verbiage is when feasible or however it's worded, but that these are the times when handcuffs would be used. I understand deferring to law enforcement as their expertise, but these are our youth that we are responsible for and to keep safe. And so in order to do that, I think that there should be a better way or language set out of when that can be appropriate or not. So as of this moment, law enforcement could do that at any time, and I'm just not comfortable with that unless there's something outlining it, that's all.
What we do outline in the Code of Conduct is when to contact police officers, and that is when a crime is committed. And so then the discretion is left up to the officer what to do with that.
So the greater question possibly is at the time of the agreement of the contract, could we have asked at that time to take a look at an expected protocol that we would like police officers in the school to use? Because we had to come to the terms of the contract to be agreed upon, correct?
Yes, I think we can try to set some boundaries, but I will point out that the administrative regulation does exist, and pursuant to board request, it is attached to this board docs for this meeting. Later in the meeting, under the governance section, the restraint administrative regulation is there. And I will say that physical restraint in the school setting is only to be used when there's an imminent threat of serious harm to either the student at issue or other students. And that physical restraint does not include momentary contact to avoid that physical harm. Physical restraint is essentially pre-planned moves like CPI techniques. That's physical restraint. So if someone were to be about to punch somebody else and you literally blocked the arm or did this to stop the blow, that's not restraint. A hold is a physical restraint. So there are some defined terms there, defined in the school code and in the admin regs, that are not applicable to SROs. However, SROs have extensive training on school-related matters. I think, if I'm recalling correctly, in excess of 40 hours of training. So without going in depth on what the substance of their training is, I'm not sure what those restraint techniques look like for them, but it would be my understanding that they are not using the same exact standards that they would use out here on the corner within the school setting, because they are specifically certified and trained for the school setting.
And I think, so the policy that you're referring to, because I know which one you're talking about, is specifically for RPS staff. And Ms. Lawrence, when you're saying police are contacted when a crime is committed, that is true, but also police do exist in the building and they can assert themselves at any time they want if there's an incident or something to happen. So I think there's like multiple.
No, they rely on us. We have to ask them to do things in terms of their involvement. And they, in terms of like even search, that they have to rise to a different level of standard when it comes to them becoming involved in certain situations. And going back to a restraint, we would not ask our police officers to restrain a child. The only time that we would ask our police officers to be involved in something like that was if we were unable to control, to maintain the hold. That is in our regulations and our guidance for our hold. Like, I can tell you that. But in terms of the police officers, we don't give away our authority to the police officers unless there's a crime in terms of an arrest or handcuffs.
Okay, so let's park the handcuffs for now, and we will revisit that at a later time.
Okay.
So-
Last question.
No, go ahead.
Oh.
Don't apologize.
So can we talk about this, or is this not in this section yet?
That's still in this section.
This is still, okay, sorry. Can this be the report form for bullying and school violence? Can this include teen dating violence as a category?
I'm glad you asked. I would propose it to have a completely separate investigation form for teen dating violence.
Okay.
Completely separate from bullying with different questions. So I'd like to have the Teen Dating Violence Committee create a new form.
Excuse me, when you're saying this, we don't have the,
Sorry.
what are you referencing?
Sorry. The report form for bullying and school violence. So it's the last page of the Code of Conduct, and it says to be completed by the bullying target, witness, or person with information about an incident of bullying or school violence and submitted to principal's office. So it has a QR code that you can scan and complete it, or it's a hand copy. So, okay. So would that be something that could be included for the upcoming school year?
Yes, it's intended to
Okay.
be ready for the upcoming school year. Correct.
Okay. All right. Those are all my questions.
Excuse me. I want to piggyback the board's prior comments on the 13 to 19 dating range. And I just wanted to, I was so busy looking at the statute in order to affirm for you that it was 13 or 19, but it does indicate when one or both parties are 13 to 19. So we will work with Student Services to wordsmith to more accurately depict what teen dating violence looks like, that it could be one or both parties that are 13 or 19.
And then looking at our clock here, I see I've got 20 seconds left. So the administrator addendum, again, is just a supplemental addendum for our administrators, which serves as a guide for how to implement the Code of Conduct. Based on the student data that you've seen today, we are going to review some of our practices and procedures and update that accordingly. And then lastly, this was our opportunity for any further questions.
I have, so first of all, to Ms. Goldsmith, in regards to the administrative regulations. Now, it may not be this one, but for some of the administrative regulations, it is just a duplicate of the policy. So let me be clear in what the expectation is from a board member's perspective where it's related to administrative procedure or regulation. So there's the policy, and then and that's what the board should be taking a look at. And so the expectation is then administration will have indicated how to carry out that policy. So it may not be this one, but in general, and that's something that we will be taking a closer look at, is the administrative procedures. So in previous scenarios that have happened, there is a question in terms on whether a staff member knew exactly how to carry out a proper restraint. So that is my point.
Okay, and that's understood. I just wanted to acknowledge that the legal team had really acknowledged those previous requests, that each time we present a policy, we present the related administrative regs, so you do see that here, and we'll see that going forward as well.
Thank you. So, one moment, and I'll yield some of my time because this is a very important topic that I don't want to rush through. So, overall, and looking at the big picture when it comes to the student code of conduct, it is a concern, and I know that there is different philosophies in terms of, do you need bodies in a building versus, change behavior and all of that. So sometimes when there's discussions brought up that will affect schools, and one of the very hot topics is what will happen with BISs in some of the schools. So as we update the student code of conduct and make changes, how are we really going to offer support in the schools if we remove the support? So some say maybe having a BIS haven't been as effective, or maybe they didn't do what was expected of them to do. So that raises another question in terms of training and the expectation. I understand it is discretionary dollars, but it's not enough to come up with a plan that sounds good if we cannot effectively execute the plan. And I think removing support from a school, relying on other areas to get to the school, not knowing if that is going to be effective or not, is not a wise thing to do. And I will hope that administration would reconsider removing support from schools. That is a conversation that have not happened and probably would not come forth until after the Student Code of Conduct is revised and voted on. And I think that it is worth having a conversation on how we're really going to support our schools where it is related to the behaviors that we are faced with. So if you're going to remove if there's not going to be a BIS in the school, what plan will the school have that will effectively deal with the behaviors that we're faced with?
So just to be clear, we'll be happy to follow up with a full report as school budgets roll out. I'm not, again, I think we're talking across each other on this one a little bit. We have, there is no plan to remove BISs. Schools have the authority to hire BISs. Many of them have multiple BISs. So I will be happy to follow up and find out where there are problem areas with that. But we have 8 quadrant-based behavioral supports that can push into schools. But we also have many schools that have multiple BISs on their budget. And to my knowledge, no school has been told they could not have a BIS on their staff. So I guess I'll need more information so we can follow up on what this concern is.
Okay, sure. So I would start with, so there is obviously a disconnect with communication from central administration to school administration, because I have gotten phone calls from parent liaisons where they received information. There is discussion about cutting BISs from schools. So I would check with specifically some middle schools and some elementary schools. So it is worth checking into it now, because I think that that is a direct impact on the student code of conduct itself and how we're going to offer support in our schools.
So Dr. Brown has sat down with every single school one-on-one, and he's talked to every single principal to make, along with their supervisor, to talk about making sure every school has what they need for academics, behavior, et cetera. There are choices that are made, but to be clear, the district has not one time gone to a principal and said, you have to remove your BIS, or you have no other choice. So Dr. Brown, you can illuminate this. You're closer to this because you're in literally every single one of those meetings.
Yeah.
Okay, excuse me, Dr. Brown, before you get started. I never said that administration said that. So there is discussions. I didn't say that it came from administration. I said that there may be a disconnect from central administration and school administration. If school administrators or principals is indeed having this conversation with schools, then there is an opportunity for them to have a conversation with central administration.
Yes. And I'm saying we are doing that. Literally, Dr. Brown has met multiple times with every single school. And so, Dr. Brown, if you would want to illuminate, are there any concerns with this issue?
I don't think there are, but we do have a principal meeting tomorrow morning, and I will make sure that I bring it up, at the all principals meeting tomorrow morning, and see if we can get to the bottom of where this is coming from. But we've literally gone through every single one of the budgets. Now, I will tell you that some of the principals have turned in, a BIS in because they want to hire a certified behavior intervention specialist. So sometimes we see some trading of those kinds of positions where they've brought in a certified person versus a non-certified person. But, nobody has said, hey, we're cutting this because you guys told us to, or, anything along those lines. So I'll clear it up tomorrow at the all principals meeting, but that is not something that I have heard in the, 80 plus meetings I've had with the principals over, the last 4 months.
Very, very good. And I can certainly appreciate that. Again, it's always a concern when conversations is being had, and I personally have received phone calls of employees really concerned about their job. So it could be a rumor, but what I'm trying to avoid is voting. If we need to make changes that require more support in schools where it relates to the student code of conduct, that need to be done before we vote on the student code of conduct rather than later. So whatever needs to happen, it could be just a very bad rumor, but nonetheless, we want to make sure that our schools are fully supported. Now, I was told that to have a behavior interventionist specialist could be used with discretionary dollars, and principals can decide if they want that or not. So to get to the point of the matter, while you're at the principals meeting, if this is something that they are considering, it is worth knowing now. That's all I'm asking. Thank you.
Thank you. If I could just please, again, explain how the process works one time, just so everyone understands how this happens. Every school has what is called a base package of services that are provided. And that is something that we base on student enrollment. That's things like the number of teachers, et cetera. Then based on the need of the school, schools that have greater need get additional dollars based on the Title I funding, but also local dollars and state dollars are redistributed to those schools. We have consistently had a series of meetings each year to determine what positions, typically that is the most common thing that buildings order, which includes the BIS, where they spend those discretionary dollars at their decision. What Dr. Brown and the supervisors have done with multiple series of meetings is they have done exactly what you have talked about, Ms. Pearson, which is so important, which is to make sure that we are having conversations to make sure schools feel like they have what they need. That does not preclude that an individual could have gotten a message from their principal that as an individual, he or she will not be back in a building, but that does not necessarily reflect that we as a district are telling people who their BIS should be or if they should have one or not, how they should spend their money. We are there kind of to support them. So I think both things could be true. It's certainly possible someone could reach out to you and say, I'm concerned I'm going to lose my job and I'm a BIS. But I can also tell you that it is not true that the district is in any way systematically telling principals who they should staff with those discretionary positions. And we have continued to fund and support that. In fact, I would estimate Mr. Zediker, how many did we have? Approximately 30 to 40 in buildings this year? And I don't see that number is going to change in any meaningful way this year. So there will be variance from building to building, but we have not taken away that authority or that financial support for schools in any way. So that's what I'm continuing to respond to here. Just to be clear, there is no district action taking place here.
Very good. I'll still like a follow-up. Thank you.
Ms. Haley?
Yes, I just have one question regarding, and I'm actually going backwards into the presentation. I just want to understand when we discuss repeated offenses and progressive discipline, and that may lead students to maybe a level 3 or a level 4. When you talk about those repeated offenses, how much time is elapsing between those offenses? Is it something that is carried over from middle school, or is it just like their elementary school career, or just their middle school career, or just high school?
No, it's just for all students that starts at the beginning of the school year. So the slate is wiped clean at the beginning of the school year.
Okay.
That doesn't preclude the building from continuing an intervention plan from the previous school year into the new school year,
Sure.
which is suggested in best practice, but we wouldn't carry one over from the previous year.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions on the code of conduct? Our last item tonight is thank you very much. Our last item tonight is to preview the consent agenda. Are there any comments or questions about the consent agenda items for performance and monitoring?
Yes, and bear with me because Board Docs is doing something special here. Thank you. Let me make sure. You are on the preview consent items, right?
Yes.
Yes, okay, so I just want to clarify and share with committee chairs. And you should have received an email from Attorney Hoadley explaining the changes because there's been a couple of times where items were in the performance and monitoring agenda when it should have been, in my opinion, Mr. Phillips can give further explanation in planning. Because performance and monitoring preview consent items can be to sometimes the extent of the alphabet. And to make sure that board members review and understand, and it's worth getting clarity on the why it would be listed in the performance and monitoring. For the DLR group, I was told that was an oversight, but then I see the design piece for Conklin. So let's just have a brief understanding, because it sounds like perhaps it could be an either or, but what is the why behind it?
Board President Pearson, we discussed this per your request in cabinet and reviewed it with legal counsel, and we stand at the ready if the board so wishes to basically move all future-looking projects to the planning committee. We see two reasons why we would be able to support that. One, Mr. Phillips logically works directly with many of those projects and is the staff liaison. And two, as you previously alluded, you can do it one of two ways. We are monitoring a often previously budgeted and previous contractual relationships is why we have had it historically in performance monitoring, going back to an original choice made a few years ago when we went to this committee model. However, we certainly are open to the idea that you could also make the case that these are projects that have not yet happened and are looking forward. So we are more than willing, if it is the will of the board, to take future-looking construction projects, architectural, et cetera, and move them to planning in that consent item agenda as opposed to performance monitoring moving forward. We certainly did not want to do that for this meeting without having you raise the issue with the board. But we have discussed it and are more than willing to make that change if that is the will of the board.
Okay, so anything that is related to contracts, does anything that will prepare for a construction, to keep it very simple and not, complicated. It doesn't affect the budget where it is, correct, Dr. Brown? So because the planning committee is far lighter than the performance and monitoring. So the likelihood of it getting missed and not ever addressed is a greater chance in performance and monitoring than it is in the planning. So for that reason, it just is a better understanding to me that if it's related to facilities, then it should be under planning. So is that the will of the board?
I think that makes sense. I just want to, just looking at a few of the things on the performance monitoring consent agenda tonight that my understanding would go to planning then. So there's asbestos abatement, interior renovations, vestibule addition, among other things, stadium renovations. Those would all be construction type projects that would go to planning.
Exactly. We have an understanding on that?
That makes sense to me.
And the staff liaisons understand that, so there's no question regarding that, Ms. Bennett?
I just wondered if people that are on those committees had any feedback or are okay with the switch or have anything to share. It's not my committee, so I was just wondering.
As the committee chair, and I deferred a second ago with Grant, we are on board with that. So, yep, we're good.
Okay, very good.
And I'm the committee chair, or Kim and I are the committee chairs. I don't know if you have any input. I didn't want to speak for you, sorry. Okay.
I'm in agreement with the
Okay, very good.
information going to the planning committee.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Chair.
Yes, April.
So to start in April.
Okay, sounds good, thank you. If there's no questions on any other questions on the consent agenda items, I guess, then that would conclude the work of the Performance Monitoring Committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter. Now Vice President McCall will now lead in the Planning Development Committee.
Thank you, Madam President. Our first item A, is school year 23-24 annual enrollment analysis report and presentation. So Flow Analytics will now give a presentation via the Zoom on the annual enrollment analysis report. Take it away, Flo.
Hi, everyone. I need the ability to share my screen, please.
Once you share your screen, please let us know who's on the call with you.
Yes, yep, I will. I can do that right now, actually, while that's getting set up. So I am Kate Doran. I work at Flow Analytics. We have been working on your enrollment forecast and your program analysis so far, which is what we're going to present about tonight. Rebecca Layock of Flow is on the call as well. She is our project manager, and Charles Reinerson is our enrollment forecaster. He's on the call as well for answering any questions. And it looks like we're ready to go. So I'm going to jump right in. Okay. All right, and I am going to go fairly quickly through these slides. We can always go back if you have questions, but just want to make sure that we can get through our presentation in a timely manner. So Flow Analytics, we are a consulting firm based out of Oregon and Washington, Portland, Oregon, and Seattle, Washington, but we have staff across the country. We assist public school districts of all sizes in many, many states across the country with student enrollment forecasts, boundary adjustments, program analysis, capacity analysis, on and on. We work with a lot of school districts, and we are equity focused and committed to community. So we're trying to make sure that you guys have a long-term positive outcome from the results of our work. The Flow project team is more than me and Rebecca and Charles. It's a few other people. We've got a lot of analysts and GIS technicians that are helping us with these analyses. So I just wanted to show you briefly the whole group that is pulling this information together for you. So the purpose of our project, why we're doing the work, Rockford Public Schools will embark on a planning process to develop a 5-year educational facilities master plan. So the goal is to present a finalized plan at the June 2024 Committee of the Whole. So the school district wants to be proactive in planning for changes in local demographics, student enrollment, identifying future resource needs like moving programs or school boundaries, or trying to figure out what that's going to look like in the future for what the district might face in the next 5 or 10 years. And we also do this with respect to the Rockford Public Schools equity vision to create learning environments that work for all students. So when we do this work, we're always providing recommendations that are kind of under that equity and opportunity umbrella. The technical process, I will not spend too much time on, but you can see it's got a lot of steps. So we have our data compilation is already done. The navy blue is done. So we'll just put it that way. Student enrollment assessment that we do and the demographic and land use analysis goes into the enrollment forecast. And then the school program analysis is this purple square that's over here. So we've completed that as well. And we're starting to work on some scenario development with the district. The timeline, you can see the first half of the project, not a lot of meetings, but a lot of work going on. And then the second half is we are working on the attendance area boundary analysis piece of the project with a lot of boundary scenario meetings and committee of the whole meetings as well to keep everyone informed. The enrollment forecast, we're going to go through 6 slides pretty quickly. I'll give you an overview of what we found. And I believe that you also have the enrollment forecast report. So historical enrollment, big picture here in orange is for each grade is the highest that grade enrollment has been from 2018 to this year, 2018, 2019 through this year. Blue is the lowest. You can see the 2020 column has the lowest enrollment for quite a lot of the school grades, but not all of them. And we're looking at just an overall decline in the number of students enrolled at the school over this time period. So lower by 969 compared to the 2018-2019 time period. So we are seeing declines over the historical enrollment time period. Kindergarten enrollment, we look at, and we look at the ratio of how many children are being born in the district versus how many eventually then 5 years later go to kindergarten. So the ratio for Rockford Public Schools for resident births has returned to the pre-COVID levels of 0.79. So 79% of babies that are born inside of the district are then attending the kindergarten. The middle scenario is what we're going to really focus on here, is the orange line. So that is the looking at the kindergarten enrollment over time that is forecasted for the district. So that's declining over time, forecasted to decrease through 2033-34. Mostly because that ratio is also declining, and we had this kind of cohort of a decline in births that everyone knows about that was experienced across the country in 2020. So this graph I will explain as the, this is the number of births is the total bar. So you can see even this is declining over time through the known years. So the teal top bars are the current, what the data that we know, the historical births for the district. So those are declining over time. The largest decline happened after 2018, which then impacts kindergarten enrollment. So even if we have the same ratio, we have a fewer number of children, coming in. So the kindergarten forecast also continues to decline over time into the future. And then that feeds into how many students are progressing from kindergarten to first to second to third, over time as well. Which takes me to grade progression ratios. So another thing that we look at is how many students are being are making the trek from one grade to another. So if it's at a 1, that means that entire kindergarten class, they all went into first grade. You didn't, maybe you gained and lost students, but at the exact same rate. If it's less than 1, then you're losing students year to year. And if it's more than 1, then you're gaining students year to year. You'll see a big gain here between 8th grade and 9th grade as students are going from middle school into high school, and then a drop from 9th to 10th. Part of that is how 9th grade is accounted for in the data, so it's not as big of a difference as is shown in this graph, but we are looking at, from 10th grade to 11th grade, a pretty significant drop as well. So we look at this, and this factors into how many students we forecast are moving through the grades each year for the next 10 years. All right, so this is the forecast itself. This is the total number of students. You'll look at the middle line, which is the dark green line. That is the middle scenario. So if we look at the middle scenario compared to this year's student numbers, we are 809 students lower 10 years out than we are currently. If you look at the high scenario, which is the pink, so that's anticipating maybe more births than we think that there would be, the higher level there, you would gain 193 students. And if you go to the low scenario, which is less than we think, then you've got the 1,800 students lower than current. So the high scenario, middle scenario, you're going between either 800 students below or 193 students above. So not huge changes, but it is declining over time. One last forecast graph for everyone. We have the scenario or the forecast broken out by grade group. So you can see that the K-5 is those bars are dropping over time from 2018 to this year to the 2028 to the 2033. The 6-8 and the 9-12, you're not seeing the same pattern happening there. And that's because you have a larger cohort of K-5 students that will be making their way up through the grades. So you won't see the same declines as the K-5 until 5-10 years later, potentially going across those grades. So you're seeing a variation there between the grades. So 6-8 is going down, 9-12 is going up. In the next 5 to 10 years, you'll see a little bit of variation there. All right, that is the forecast. We can go back at the end of the presentation if we need to, but that's what we have pulled together, and Charles would be the one to answer any questions that you have about the forecast. Quickly, I'm going to jump into the program analysis. So another piece that we did was to look at special programs, bilingual programs, and special education programs, where they are located within the district, where they are located relative to where students live, to see if there were any recommendations or patterns that we could find and recommendations that we could give for thinking about programs in the future. So key findings: special program students travel the furthest. Special program locations are clustered in the northwest part of the district. Bilingual program locations are much better distributed throughout the district, but they tend to be located in the center. Special education programs are the most widely distributed and the most accessible programs overall. So we did a few tables for the report. We won't go into them in too much detail, but we did look at the number of students in the program and how many students are served in each grade. And then you can see how the percentage of that grade that is being served by that program. So bilingual Spanish by far was the highest, serving the highest number of students of any program. We created a map of the program locations relative to student density, just to kind of show where all of these programs are located for various program types. We did an accessibility analysis. So we looked at students that live within a mile of a program school, between a mile and a half of a program school, and then outside of a mile and a half. So looking at a walk zone for a school that has a program versus students that live outside of that walk zone and might have to get transportation to that program, might be less likely to go to the program potentially. Just what does that breakdown look like? How many students live within these areas near these programs? And again, bilingual Spanish, 41.8% of the district students, K-12 all, live within a mile of a bilingual Spanish program. So that's amazing. So, and then you have another 23% that live that next half mile out. So a lot of students within that area, but some of these programs only have one location, so you're not capturing as many students. And then this was for the special education students as well. So you have the PLUS program with the highest number of students within a mile of the program. All right, 3 maps, and then we're done. We've got the program maps that we pulled together. So what you want to think about with these maps is each of these squares represents an area where students live. So if there's no square, there's no students living in that area. And the areas that are hot pink are the areas where there are both a high number of programs and a high number of students. So you've got the darker pink there is students that are being well served by a good number of programs. This is for special programs. And then the blue are the areas where there are high numbers of students and a medium number of programs. And then the green areas tend to be high number of students, the dark green, and no programs accessible to the students in those squares. So for the special programs, you can see a concentration on the northwest side of the district where most of the special programs are located. There are a lot of students there, but it's not covering the whole district. So contrast this with the student and bilingual program count map. So you've got more coverage for programs overall, but you've got a different location for where those high number of programs and high number of students are. So you're looking more in the center of the district, a little bit on the west side of the district, but mostly kind of centralized for the bilingual programs. And the dark green area now is on the northwest side. And you've got areas over there that don't have bilingual programs. So maybe that's somewhere, that the district might want to look at. Finally, we've got special education programs, 2 kind of centers you can see there in the pink that are really, kind of covering a good area of the district. The blue is covering most of the rest of the district, and you don't really see a lot of dark green at all, which means most students are living near a school that has at least one special education program. So better coverage overall for these programs in this case. So we took those maps and the analysis that we did for the 1 and 1.5 miles, came up with some recommendations, looking at, any new special programs. They could be implemented at schools that are in each of the kind of 4 quadrants of the district. So it's pretty centralized in one quadrant currently. So looking at if there's a new program, establishing it in a different place, considering moving Gifted Academy to West Middle School, so it's a little closer to some more students, might be a lot less travel. Bilingual programs, already reviewing areas where there's less bilingual programming and seeing if there's a need in those areas, and looking at the schools that could potentially take that program. And special education programs, looking at the SELF program to understand if there might be a more central location to place a high school or middle school program, or considering a second location just to be more accessible to more students. And that is the end of my presentation, and we can take questions if we have time. And thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any questions regarding the annual enrollment analysis report and presentation? Madam President.
So this may be a separate question, Mr. Phillips, in regards to, well, it is separate. So if you can email me an update on what transportation will look like for the upcoming year. One of the schools, to be specific, Lewis Lemon, still have a significant attendance issue for those students in walking distance. And I think that will make the difference in their outcomes if the students, no doubt, was there. So that is separate from the presentation. So I guess I don't have any questions for this presentation, Ms. McCaw.
Thank you, and thank you, Flow Team. We will move on to item B, 2025 budget requests from the Communications, Family, and Community Engagement, the Welcome Center / FIT program, Process Improvement, Athletics, Financial Services, Superintendent / Board, Legal, Technology, Security, Services, and Operations.
Before Mr. Dawson Jr. gets started, can we check the thermostat, please?
Tonight. It's perfect. It's perfect. Tonight's FY25 budget request will be presented by Earl Dotson Jr., Chief Communications Officer, Greg Brown, Chief Financial Officer, Dr. Jarrett, Superintendent Ishika Goldsmith, Deputy General Counsel, Jason Barthel, Chief Information Officer, and Michael Phillips, Chief Operations Officer, for their respective departments. And Mr. Dotson Jr. will start us off.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening. Understanding our time constraints and the number of presentations we have, I understand it's really important for me to really slow down and take my time as I present my budget. So please bear with me. So starting us off, you can see all of my direct reports of the departments that I have the opportunity to oversee. Starting with communications, you can see the core functions of the communications department. Some of the communications highlights, certainly the communication platform, Aptigee, thank you again for the board support in that. And then, of course, the aforementioned earlier tonight, the coffee chats, great collaboration with our board. We look forward to putting those on and just really appreciate how we work together to make that happen. More highlights. So here's our budget summary. So if you look at salaries and benefits, our line is a little bit higher here is because we hired our Director of Marketing, Mr. Pearson, in August, which impacted our budget for this cycle. And then our purchase services number is a little bit higher. That is the reflects Aptigee. That's the initial payment and the annual payments for that communications platform. You can see our contracts, and again, you can see Aptigee, how that contract is realized here on our detail of contracts. And then our return on investment. I think it's just really important that we efficiently and effectively communicate, and as it relates to branding and marketing, that we really highlight all the really great things and positive things that happen in our school district. Family and community engagement. You can see, again, here's the organizational chart for the communications team, led by Mr. Pearson, and the family community engagement team, led by Maureen Kirschman. You can see their core functions. And then their highlights. I would just point out, again, the job you've all witnessed, how they've, the great job Maureen and her team did with those ARP-ESSER community call to actions agreements. And then I'll just plug the volunteer celebration. I'm biased. I think that is the best celebration party in the district. I believe that's May 22nd. Mark your calendars at the Nicholas Conservatory. And then their return on investment, that team, they just do a great job with maintaining our volunteer database, and they are the portal to a lot of our engagement with our community organizations. The Welcome Center and Families in Transition, you can see the organization chart for the Welcome Center, Christina and her team. You can see their core functions here, just the importance of enrolling our students according to board policy in a very efficient manner. And then, one of the things I'm going to continue to be proud of, we've talked about launching online enrollment for years now, and to finally have that realized, we're just very excited about that. And then the Families in Transition Department, you can see here some of the core functions that they perform there with that department. And then I would just think to highlight the fact that we still have those 4 grant-funded fit social services coordinators. That just really gives a high impact, more focused kind of case management with the families who need those services. And then you can see their budget. There's just the salaries and benefits, the board-approved increases, and their budget is pretty much flat. And then here's their detail of contracts, the Nexus Risk Solutions software for address verification. And their return on investment, I just think what they do, and I always tell them, they just do a really great job of high-quality customer service with all of the different families that visit our school district and the Welcome Center. Process improvement, Sarah and her team, you can see there's their organizational chart. There is the process improvement core functions. And then again, the highlights, again, we finally got both of those for registration online. You can see they did a really good job when we launched that. And I just think it's important that, that more and more families have access to that, and that we continue to utilize that online function. You can see their budget. Again, their budget is relatively flat. And you can see their detail of their contracts. And then again, their return on investment is just really doing a really great job of registering families. You can see they have a high rate of families who register, and they make sure that we get all of that paperwork, all those core things done, and they do a good job of that. Fine Arts, I think you got an opportunity to hear Melissa Wolf presentation back in January. And other things they do, here's Melissa and Virginia on her team. You can see their core functions and their highlights. The one I really like, all of them, but I really like the creation of the 5th grade band ensemble. I think that really is a good thing that helps highlight and helps build our feeder system so that we can get kids going early on and get them ready for those next levels. And here are more of their highlights. They just continue to do a great job with the Fine Arts Hall of Fame, another great event. And you can see their budget summary. Melissa and worked with finance. They did a great job. You can see they actually were able to find some efficiencies in their budget and save some money there. And then you can see their contracts. And their return on investment, I think we all have heard just the importance of fine arts, how the enrichment and how that enhances students' education. Athletics, we also got a chance to hear Dawn Williamson back in January, presented some of the great things that are happening in athletics. There's her org chart. Dawn and Abby do a great job. There are their core functions. And then the highlights, again, I'll just go over. You can see that some of the things they've added, the bowling, and they added chess. And again, we just understand that there's just how important athletics are, again, to education and engagement for our students. You can see her budget summary. Dawn also did a really great job, found some really efficiencies in a number of ways. You can see that we were able to save money out of her budget. And then here are the details of her contracts, or that team's contracts. And then again, just talking about the return on investment. Again, just the students who participate in sports, that creativity, lower rates of anxiety and stress, and improve life skills. So, and with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions?
Yes.
Madam President.
No worries. On page 25, or slide 25, for process improvement, for student record compliance, specifically what does that consist of, and are you working with student services? Is that's no exchange of information there? Okay. And
yes, so student record compliance is that's working with clericals to make sure that when they go out and audit our clericals, that they have all the proper documents, birth certificates, all of the things that need to be in the file when they go out and audit those folks.
And the e-school data verification and cleanup. So is that the Chromebooks or
no, ma'am. So that is when we have a lot of people who enter data in the e-school, and when they make mistakes, the process improvement teams go through e-school and clean up all the data so that we have good data. So bad data in, so we need good data out. So they go in and make sure everything is proper and clean it up.
Very good. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Any other questions? Okay, continue. Dr. Brown.
Okay, I'm going to actually start mine off with just giving you a quick update on the budget. So last fall, when we kind of gave you a preview of what we thought FY25 was going to look like, we were looking at about a $10 million operating deficit. So we have done a lot of work since October to whittle away at that. Those numbers were from when we had to, post this on board docs. We're at about $8.3 million of savings at the district level right now, and then we're actually under $1 million of savings at the school level, and that number might continue to go down. We're really looking to try and get as much of the savings we can at the district level. So, once we get a little closer to having the budget finalized, we'll give you guys details on where we were able to whittle away at that. So our district level departments are still continuing to trim the expenses. We are seeing some necessary increased costs, and you'll hear from that when Jason actually talks about some of the security area. And then we're just going to continue to report back on a monthly basis. And then I think in June we should have a pretty good picture on what the FY25 budget is going to look like. So overall for us, this is our structure. The people that are underneath the, kind of the department heads there, you can see the team members on those teams, payroll and purchasing. These are our core functions, budget, payroll, the big things that you would expect to see, from a finance area. Financial service highlights. I think the big one for us is really we increased the ISB financial profile score this year from a 3.8 to a 3.9. The highest score you can get is a 4.0. So that was a nice increase that we got from last year. So solid performance there. Big one here, we closed out the ESSER and the ESSER 2 grants. That was nice to get those done. We continue this real intense budget process with the principals, which I think they really seem to appreciate it. And, feel like they've really got a lot of input. The one thing that's been real different on the budget roadshows this year from the principal point of view is they're really tying their school improvement plans to the money. And so they're really using the money that they have available to drive those school improvement plans this year, which has been great. A few other highlights here, nothing major here to report on the rest of the highlights. Bullet point on this one, 3-year teacher vacancy grant. You've heard Jason Pope talk a lot about that. We're seeing a lot of good results coming from the teacher vacancy grant spending that we've been doing this year. And actually, he's on a recruiting trip right now. So, we hope that he brings back some good news on that. Overall, in our budget, you'll see salary and benefits really didn't change a whole lot. Because some of these grants are winding down, we were actually able to reduce a position in our department that we don't think that we're going to need to refill. So that position became vacant in December of this year, and we're just not going to fill it going forward unless we absolutely have to. So as far as contracts goes, you can see that the Cobblestone software, that's our contract management software that we think is really going to help on tracking a lot of our contracts. Frontline Technology, we had a contract there, and we were really paying for a lot of things that we really weren't using, so we're going to reduce that one down. And then these are our big ones, audit for the external audit, and then the OPEB audit is a pension audit that we have to do every year to assess our exposure on other pension obligations. So our return on investment here, really effective internal controls, reliable financials, which is what I know you guys are concerned with, and just really being an excellent steward of taxpayer dollars. So any questions?
Madam President.
Have we given any thought to, well, let me ask this question first. So where it relates to policies and the finances, have you had an opportunity to look at any of the policies that will fall under your department?
Mm-hmm. Yep, actually I've gone through all of them, and you'll see an investment one I think that's on the board agenda for this month that we've actually made a few changes to.
Okay. And have we given any more thought to researching a grant writer? I know that we have individuals in our district that have the capability of writing grants, but have we considered seeking out specifically grant writers? I am really concerned with potentially losing programs that was birthed out, for lack of a better word, with the COVID relief fund. And I'm really concerned about what will happen with those, that support not being present.
Yeah, I know the I&I department is really our primary grant writing and grant seeking arm. I know that they're constantly on the lookout, for new opportunities and new funding. I don't know that they've really identified anything, that's really out there that would be a dramatic influx of cash right now to make up for, the loss of any of that COVID spending. But I do know they're on the outlook for opportunities.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you, Dr. Brown. Dr. Jarrett?
Thanks, Dr. Brown. Thank you. Our department is a 3-person team. We have Laura, Amy, and I. And highlights, I think will probably be just as easy to walk through. We are looking at a relatively flat budget with salary increases. And we're holding the line on all of our contract items. There's a slight increase for board docs. That's what Diligent is. We're holding the lines with our lobbying investment, our Alignment Rockford investment. We had money that we have, some additional money. We think from the price quote we have pending agreement with the REA and moving forward with DLT next year, we still think for $15,300 or less, we will be able to do that. So that will allow us to save some dollars for FY25 there. Rockford Promise and a potential investment to the chamber, although we have not brought that to the board yet for review. And again, I think really we exist to support the board and the board's budget and our governance work together. Any questions?
Any questions for Dr. Jarrett? Madam President?
Yes, so the board does not have any say in terms of raises and bonuses, but I think it is something to consider. I noticed that Dr. Jarrett's team is a cross-trained because Amy covers Laura when Laura's gone and vice versa. And for whatever it's worth, Dr. Jarrett, they should receive a bonus periodically. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We think they are very valuable team members for sure. And now I'd like to turn it over to Ms. Goldsmith for the legal presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Jarrett. Mrs. Goldsmith.
Good evening. I'm Yoshika Goldsmith. I'm going to present the legal department's budget for you this evening. We're a small department led by Attorney General Counsel Holdley, then myself, and then we have an executive assistant, 2 investigation managers, a paralegal, and also a staff attorney. The highlights for us include continuing to ensure access to programming for all students, and also staying abreast of any new statutory requirements or changes in regulations. One that comes top of mind for this school year was the implementation of the FACE law provision of employment history review processes, something very important with regard to screening out sexual misconduct related issues in the application process. We continue to use outside counsel services for very complex matters or matters that can become very lengthy, including certain employment matters, some student matters, as well as real estate, tax exemption appeals, etc. For our budget, we were essentially able to maintain flat across the board salaries and benefits. You'll see the anticipated board-approved increases, purchase services. There's a narrative behind that involves our director of purchasing making a really good catch, and I'll give you a little bit of detail on that. But we were able to keep supplies, non-capital expenditures pretty much flat. With regard to the detail of our contracts, we'll maintain our Westlaw legal research services. We use an outside auditing firm, and we also had intended to use some contract software, and we budgeted the $30,000 there, but our director of purchasing had looked into and really investigated and researched Cobblestone, which we found had some of the same characteristics that we were looking at spending the $30,000 for. He was able to identify that the Cobblestone had essentially some of the same characteristics, and there's a high likelihood that we may be able to save that $30,000 that we've budgeted for and instead use Cobblestone. So I wanted to shout him out and thank him for the care that he takes in the work that he's doing, and the fact that he's not siloed. He brings us all in, including the superintendent's office as well when needed. Outside counsel expenditures, we are looking to stay within our budget for FY24, which is down from last fiscal year, and we anticipate being able to bring that down a little bit more in FY25. It is an area that is very difficult to anticipate because of the fluctuation of litigation. We can't always time when a matter that has been ongoing for years will suddenly ramp up in their expenditures related to discovery or other related expenses to the litigation. Return on investment, we continue to work hard to try to control the risk that the district is taking, enforce district policy and procedure, and also continue our internal ongoing internal investigation activity. Any questions?
Any questions for Mrs. Goldsmith?
I have one.
Mr. Carpenter.
Thank you. Are the outside counsel expenditures, is that included in the purchased services?
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
Let me go back. Yep, right there.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mrs. Goldsmith.
All right.
Mr. Bartell, next.
All right, good evening. I'll be presenting information technology and security services. It's about the next 30 slides, so I'll do my best to keep it to about a minute per slide here. This is an overview of the information technology department, and I've got security services on here as well. You'll see we have educational technology, information services, IT security, technology services, and security services. This is just a look at educational technology. Here is our information services department. Here's our ITIS security department. And here's our technology services department. You'll see security services in a few slides. So some of our information technology highlights that we've really worked on over the past year. One of the things I'm very proud of is our recorded uptime, meaning our systems are available 24/7, 365, including our internet access. It's our first time in 6 years that we've actually reached 99.99%. So that's something I'm very proud of our team. As you can see, a lot of the work that we do for our classroom and student preparation, as far as deploying a quarter of our Chromebooks annually and doing that replacement and refreshment, as well as our iPads, and then also the help desk tickets that we work on an annual basis as well. A few more highlights here. One of the ones I want to point out here is helping and working with Mr. Dotson and his team with the implementation of online enrollment registration. And then our work with our educational technology team and working with the teachers during summer professional learning and developing 50 courses to help them navigate technology throughout the school year. This is an overall view of our technology services budget summary. As you can notice, the total there is about $1.28 million more than it was in FY24. I do want to point out when we discussed some of those things that we're going to bring over from ARPS, or one of those was IT security contracts. We put a great cybersecurity infrastructure in place, and those are things we are continuing, and that's about $730,000 of that cost, which was already budgeted for and planned for. And there's an additional $550,000 that we budgeted for life cycle replacement of laptops for staff, as well as some dollars in there for a build out of our data center for the CCEC. So that was already pre-planned dollars. So that's about $1.28 million of that. The next few slides will be our contracts. We kind of broke them up in different categories. This one is our student resources and remote. We reduced some areas around Adobe Creative Cloud, and we reduced Zoom quite a little bit as well. These are our business operations contracts. Of notable, we spent a lot of time at looking at our larger agreements to find areas of opportunity to trim some dollars on features that we weren't using, such as our Microsoft agreements, or in the case of online enrollment and registration, that is a reflection of the one-time costs that we absorbed when we brought that system online, and we will not be seeing in FY25. Here's some of our technology and development contracts here. We work with a lot of different professional services development for such as Power School and WS Hall Consulting, Streamkind Consulting for some of our development of dashboards and different forms within our business systems such as Business Plus. And then we've also used others such as Network Consulting for additional help as we build our networks out, and we're continuing to reduce that number year over year as my staff learns new technology. One of the significant decreases here is our device repair, as we're seeing less breakage rates year over year, and we're excited to see that decrease even more in the following year. Here's just an overview of our telephony and communication contracts. We pulled a few items out of here, specifically Stack 8, the telephony management. We're able to accommodate that without this particular contract and software through other means that we've been able to do through our network infrastructure. Here's some of more of our telephony communication continued. I wanted to just point out one, and that's School Messenger. As Mr. Dotson mentioned earlier, Apogee, which was reflected in his budget for a little over $172,000. This $38,500, while it's not captured in my budget, it is used to help offset that cost for the new software, as the features and functionality will be in Apogee. Here's some compliance and reporting software here that we use for a number of different things. For the most part, we were flat. We did add a request at the bottom, SmartPass, that was kind of a grassroots effort from several of the high schools I've worked closely with the principals on, which we'll be bringing forward to board likely in May. And this is for a digital hall pass as well as a digital ID. So just a quick little talk on that. With the digital ID, what we've seen at our summer football games prior to students coming to school and they're getting scanned coming, they don't have an actual ID. And in some cases, it does take a couple weeks, as it was mentioned earlier, to get that ID. So what we'll be able to do is provide a digital ID for those who have smartphones so they can get scanned going into sporting events and things like that. And there's a hall pass component is that as well. And there'll be more information to follow on that in the coming months. This is some of the IT security backup contracts that we do have. I will point out the IT security agreements, you're seeing it just as one lump. It is actually 22 different contracts, and that's for things such as multi-factor authentication, our backup, our disaster recovery contracts. We don't explicitly share it on here, but you do see it on different board and on closed session type of things, because we don't want to give the bad guys our roadmap, if you will. So I wanted to share that one. These are some of our miscellaneous contracts I want to share. We are doing some upgrades in our help desk area for more automation and provide better support for our folks out there. We do have some current software that is becoming end of life, and we're looking at enhancing that, specifically our ticketing system for next year. These are not captured in the IT budget, but I did want to put this together. This is reflected in, these two are reflected in budgets across the district, but I wanted the board to understand what these contracts look like. We do have a copier contract, which is a per copy charge that we get across the district, and it is captured in school and department budgets. We do see a slight decrease going into FY25 for that. And then our cellular contract, we got cell phones as well as tablets in our buses that are on this cellular contract, and I want you to see what that looked like for the district. We see a slight increase in that for next year. Return on investment, we're providing secure and available technology access. We're supporting our applications, and we're providing dashboards and reports for data-driven decision-making. The next one will be security services. This is the first time we actually had an org chart for this one. It's been Fred for about 18 years here. Based on our audit and our recommendations for that, we felt it prudent to be able to request a security services coordinator to help with some of the day-to-day stuff so Fred can be strategic out in our buildings. Here's some of the highlights over the last year that the security services team has worked on. One of the big pieces, which was a big issue for us at the beginning of the year, was guard attendance. We were able to increase that from a 59% average to 85% plus, which is really helpful to the schools. This is an overall view of the security services budget. As you'll notice, there's an increase in salaries and benefits, adding that additional position. You'll see a substantial increase in purchase services, which you'll see on the contract slide in the next couple slides. And then we were able to reduce some non-capital items as well, and we'll talk through that. The first two are Montel Technologies. These are installation, maintenance of our current security equipment, and then also build out of new cameras and replacement in our buildings, which we are keeping flat. We were able to reduce the City of Rockford's school resource officer contract by about $110,000, and that's based on what we saw for trending for overtime costs and things like that. Talking to Dr. Brown in finance, we think that will drop even more than what we're seeing here. You do see a substantial increase in the school security guards contract. There's two things. One, we went from 73, or we're requesting it to go from 72 to 73 guards. Lincoln was in dire need of an additional security guard in their building, and has been asking for a couple of years now, and we'd like to do that. The other is the substantial increase that they've had in pay for the guards. So the district as a whole was paying $21.77 an hour for the guards, and with that jumped to $27.55. The guards themselves, to the company, the guards themselves went from a $13 $13 an hour to $17 an hour increase for their pay. And that was very important as we looked at this very closely because of the fact of our attendance rate that we're having with the guards. When we did go out to kind of poke around to see what other guard companies were charging, because we will be up for bid for this contract next year. We're seeing the going rate substantially more than the $27.55 an hour. So we felt that this would be a way of managing our costs for FY25, and then we're going to have to figure out what FY26 looks like. Just a quick overview on this. There's a decrease with the evolved weapons detection just because we don't have the year one installation costs. And Zero Eyes, the weapons detection for our cameras, that is software that lives on our cameras. We did actually have this captured in the IT budget last year. It is put in the security services budget this year. And return on investment, just providing a safe and secure environment for students and staff. Any questions?
Ms. Haley?
Yeah, I just have a question on slide 86. Let's get back to that. Okay. What was the reason for the substantial increase in purchase services, supplies?
The purchase services were primarily because of the additional, or the ARP ESSER dollars that were, the dollars that were captured in ARP ESSER in contract agreements in previous years that is being captured in Fund 10 in this upcoming year. Supplies, this is primarily with our 5-year planning. So this is our life cycle planning. We have, and we actually technically would decrease, but it looks high. So things like laptop replacements, we budget about $1.5 million for, and so it's a 5-year plan that we put together. That also includes our Chromebooks, which we do 5,500 per year, and some other classroom technology such as smart boards, some of the replacements that we have to do there.
Okay, so there's a substantial decrease in the non-capital. What's the reason for that decrease?
Last year we captured some things, and this is just really some movement on some things as well, but we had some stuff that was captured non-capital that really should have fallen under supplies based on the dollar amounts. So that was shifted in on the slideshow here.
Okay.
Any other questions, Madam President?
I do not have a question on your budget, but I do have a question regarding AI. So AI is pretty hot topic. So the software that we currently have, does it prevent students from using AI sources through our devices?
So we haven't explicitly came out like some of the school districts to prevent using AI. Susan Urim, our educational technology director, and her team has actually done a fantastic job at working on collaboratively with the teachers as well as some of the buildings to talk about what does a policy look like. AI is here to stay. We can't prevent it, but how do we use it effectively, and teach students how to use it, and how can teachers use it? So she's done several courses, even this past year's summer professional learning. She's actually, she and her team are actually going to be on the State of Illinois AI committee. They put that request out, and I think I sent it out this week to cabinet. But Susan actually is also a finalist for some with a group called Magic School for her AI professional learning and teaching. So it's really new to us. We're at the beginning of that, but we're really working on what does it really look like in a school district, and we're establishing what that looks like now.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Bartell. Mr. Phillips, next.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Mike Phillips, Chief Operating Officer here to present the Operations Department budget tonight. As we look here, we're looking at my department and the folks that I work with. Next, we have Scott Jensen, our Director of Design and Construction, and his direct reports. our new Executive Director of Facilities, Eli Timish, and his direct reports in facilities, operations. And then Steve Christopa, or excuse me, Kathy Ellis, our Director of Operations, and the folks that report to her. And last but not least, Steve Christopa, our Director of Logistics and Support Services, which includes our distribution department and our print services. And then just some of our highlights. Greg had pointed this out earlier, but within design and construction, we successfully closed our HVAC upgrade projects that were primarily tied to our ESSER 2, which needed to be completed, closed out, billed, and by September 30th of 2023. We accomplished that, so that was a big feat. Within facilities and operations, I just want to highlight our trades department. Last summer, they renovated 8 restrooms within Lewis Lemon Elementary School and just did a fabulous job between the plumbing, flooring, electrical, and some of the carpentry. We've got a very skilled trades group, very impressed with that group. Distribution and print services. Our distribution department does a great job in recycling things. So just they recycled 74,000 pounds of obsolete electronics coming out of our IT department and other areas. And then 93,000 pounds of paper and cardboard. And our print shop averages between about 330,000 impressions per month, working for the administration building and all of our schools. So we create a lot of product. So as we look at our budget summary, you'll see salary and benefits rose slightly. That includes our collective bargaining agreement raises that come along with that, and then our proposed increases for non-certified folks. I do want to point out that we did not fill a senior manager's position. We dispersed those responsibilities, felt that we could save money there and not fill that and still complete the mission of that department. Purchase services, you'll see a slight increase there. That includes our contracted vendors that we work with, and those are the contractual increases that come along with that. Within supplies, we have a huge variance in supplies. You'll notice that utilities is in our supply line item, and that increase is primarily due to electricity. And there's a few different reasons for that. We've actually experienced more usage in FY24 than we expected. So actually that FY24 dollar amount should have been a little bit higher than what we had it at. As we enter in FY25, we're going to be bringing on more of our buildings with air conditioning. So that's going to increase our electricity usage there. And then lastly, our utility distribution costs that we pay to ComEd. And I want to specifically point out the carbon-free energy adjustment that we get. So 2 years ago, when our electricity costs were higher, our cost per kilowatt hour were higher, we were actually seeing credits from ComEd on that carbon-free adjustment. Now that prices have went down, ComEd has flipped and they're charging us. So we saw huge increases in what we're paying ComEd specifically because of that. And that went through, and we'll just go, there was some state law. ComEd said we have to break even, we need to have 3 cents per kilowatt hour. So that's what that carbon-free adjustment really ensures that ComEd is making what they need to there. Lastly, I just want to highlight on capital there, you'll notice we have a large decrease, $2.4 million there. And the reason for that is we've decided to defer the phase 2 at Sterling Holly for this upcoming year, move that to FY26 to save some dollars. So overall, we're seeing an overall variance of about $347,000. I'm not, oh, here we go. So now we're moving into our detail of contracts. Just highlight here, once again, Constellation Energy, electric service. You'll see that's where that large increase is that I discussed a little bit earlier. I also want to point out Forefront. We'll be, in April, we'll be bringing an update to the board on our behind-the-meter projects that were approved last January. We're going to see construction start on those this summer, so we're expecting those to come online in FY25. So we'll see some of those costs being diverted to Forefront Power where we're purchasing that. And then I just want to highlight we are decreasing natural gas. We went from about 79 cents per therm to 49 cents per therm last March. So we're seeing a decrease, a continued decrease in our natural gas costs. On this slide, I don't know that there's, that once again, this is just a lot of the contracts that we have with different vendors that support us. This one I do want to highlight distinctive roofing. You'll notice that's down $168,000, and the reason for that, as you've been very supportive in a lot of our capital projects. One of those is replacing roofs across the district, which we'll talk about a little bit differently. So while we still do preventative maintenance on our roofs, our actual roof repairs continue to go down as we replace roofs, which is a good deal. Again, some more just folks we work with. So then we'll move into Fund 60, which is our capital projects fund. Our purchase services there include our builder's risk insurance and then DLR Group, who is assisting us on our facilities master plan. I'll talk about the variance in the next slide. And then capital projects. We'll see an increase by $6.9 million. We're just doing a lot of projects this summer. Kind of highlight, we will be doing several roofs under Fund 60. We'll be doing our Wyeth and Swanson Stadium renovations, our Jefferson track and field turf upgrades, as well as, I'm just going to mention a few here, we also have a vestibule addition going on over at East High School. The reason for that is our Evolve weapons detection system was not able to fit in the east entrance where our students typically come in. So we shifted that to the old main entrance off Charles Street. When we build that vestibule, we'll shift those students that come off the student parking lot back to that entrance there. So that was the purpose for that project. As I discussed, here's the detail of our contracts. Just the way the contract worked out with DLR Group, we are spending more in FY25 than we did in FY26, but it's the total $630,000 that was approved. And then lastly, our HVAC upgrades this summer. We still have 19 schools that will be working in this summer to complete that project. So this is the ARP ESSER portion of the HVAC upgrades. Those need to be complete by September 30th of this fiscal year. So, we are on track to do that and excited to bring all these schools online for air conditioning and being able to extend our day and years. So. As we move into Fund 92, which is our life safety dollars, we do have folks that some of their salary is part of our life safety. And once again, the variance there you'll see is the proposed increases for our non-certified folks. We have a slight decrease in purchase services. And then in our capital projects, we have a slight increase of what we're doing this year in life safety. Just want to highlight, once again, we have some roofs that we're being taken care of as part of our 10-year our decennial life safety. And then the 5 schools that will be replacing fire alarms in, which Risa, Eisenhower, goodness gracious, I can't remember them off the top of my head now, but we've got 5 schools. Jefferson is another one that we'll be doing. Details of contracts here. This is where our fire alarm contractor is at, and TEM, which we just went out for a request for proposal. Prior to that, it was Carnell-Conover that was our environmental vendor that we used, and we selected TEM to be our new vendor that they'll be starting in July. And return on investment, we create spaces that promote learning, collaboration, and social health. We're here to control exposure to risk and provide support to all schools and departments. I'll take any questions.
Stanford?
I have two questions.
Yep.
One, elevator maintenance is up $79,000.
Yeah, so that we do have several lifts and elevators across the district. As you know, we just replaced the ones in this building, and this will be something that we would need to look at during our facilities master plan. A lot of our elevators, Lincoln, Welsh, are older elevators that do need to be replaced, and a lot of these parts are obsolete, and so they're becoming more expensive and harder to obtain.
My other question is about the asbestos abatement. How much more asbestos do we have?
Yeah.
We have been abating asbestos for 4 years since I've been around.
And we'll continue to abate. We've got
Does it just grow?
Well, no, actually, we're making headway. You know, a lot of our flooring abatement, but anytime we open a wall, any pipe insulation that, you know, you typically don't see, that has joints that need to be abated. Now we've got, you know, drywall, and the mud joints have some asbestos in them. So I don't know. By the time we get done abating, then it'll be gypsum or something else that we'll need to do something differently with. So I think we'll continue to talk about that.
That was it. Thank you.
Any other, Madam President?
Does the age of our buildings have anything to do with that?
With the asbestos, why we continue to have asbestos?
Yes.
I mean, that's definitely because the age they were built. Now, from the last facilities master plan, we decreased the age of our buildings down. We're probably, I think, 53 years where we were in the 60s. But yes, the age of our buildings does drive some of that abatement.
Okay, and I have a question regarding our builder's risk insurance. Have we had to utilize that much over the last, say, 5 years? If so, what would an estimated dollar amount be that we've had to turn into?
So I think the only project that we've actually submitted to builder's risk was when we did the clear story here. Ms. Pearson, I think you were here, and we had, the contractor did not do a good job of making us weather tight. So we had water that had gotten into the building. We had to do, so, and I forget, I can get you what that cost was, but typically we really press back on our contractors if it really needs to be a builder's risk claim. And I'll give you an example of this. Last March, when we had the large storm come through, we actually had a rooftop dedicated to our outdoor air unit that was not properly secured on the Lincoln roof. It was blown off. Our contractor came to us and wanted to claim that under builder's risk. I did not allow them to do that because it was not secured properly. So, I mean, we definitely, it's there to keep us, you know, both us and the contractor safe, but we just don't use it because we've got it. You know, if there's a reason, we definitely want to be fair. In that case, that's just an example where they did not secure something properly, and we push back on the use of it.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Phillips. We will now move on to item C, College and Career Education Decennial Life Safety Audit. Each school board is required to have its school built. What's up?
No, tell them to stay there.
Each school board is required to have its school buildings surveyed no less than every 10 years by licensed design professional in conformance with previous section of 2 3.12 of the Health and Life Safety Code. In the course of the inspections, violations are identified and prioritized. Violations identified as priority A or urgent are required to be addressed within the next 12 months. Within 12 months, violations identified as priority B or required must be addressed within 5 years. In the course of the inspection at the College and Career Center, Education Center, 2 violations were identified as priority A and 20 violations were identified as priority B. The estimated cost of the repairs, including A&E fees and contingency, is $2,043,000. Are there any questions regarding the College and Career Education Center? Seeing none, Madam President, do you have one?
I'm going to email.
Okay, seeing none, this will be brought forward to the March 19th board meeting for action. We will now do the review of the consent items. We have one item, the new hire teacher incentives. The proposed incentives is to continue recruitment incentives to entice hard-to-fill candidates to join RPS 205. Administration is recommending continuation of the recruitment incentives for the following amounts and positions: $5,000 for bilingual, secondary math, and secondary science, $7,000 for special education to include the following: special education teachers, speech language pathologists, procedural coaches, social workers, and school psychologists. Are there any questions regarding the new hire teacher incentives? Seeing none, this will complete the report for the Planning and Development Committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President McCall. I will now present the agenda items for Governance Committee. Policy 6.235 is revised to identify the audit standards applicable to information technology governance. This recommendation was made as part of the IT audit outcomes. Board Policy 7.181 is updated to remove outdated language and to reflect the school code prohibition on placing students in timeout or isolated timeout. It is recommended that the dance policy 7.335 be repealed as it is obsolete. I've asked for a policy 4.60 to be placed back on the agenda for the board's review and discussion. Board member Carpenter asked me to have further discussion regarding this policy and to invite Mr. Paul Noli back in case board members have questions. So specifically, Mr. Carpenter, what were some of your concerns?
I think we had received a proposed amendment to the purchase and contracts policy to reflect or to include a responsible bidder policy, and I wanted to address that. I wanted to see if the administration had any thoughts on that, and I wanted to see if there were any thoughts that any board members had on that. I thought it was something that we should consider and I think move forward on, if depending on what the thoughts on everybody else has, including administration.
Does Mr. Phillips stepped out?
And if I could add, including administration and also legal, I guess what I would welcome their input.
I think what we will do is, if the board would like us to review the policy that was proposed, we'll immediately send that to legal for review, because obviously but I don't think we're going to have any comments tonight on the board floor. We'll review the policy, and then Attorney Hoadley and the legal team can go back and forth and determine what, if any, recommended changes we would have.
Sure, thank you. I didn't expect anything tonight exactly, but if anybody else has any thoughts now or sometime soon, I would like to hear them.
So typically, what I've noticed that when there's previously been questions about the bidding process, and historically and usually the district has gone with the lowest bidder. So the question is that being a responsible bidder going with the lowest bidder?
Well, I think that, or I mean, it's more than just the lowest bidder.
Right.
I mean, they have to meet qualifications, and I think that the qualifications in this proposal are important. So to add,
I think it is worth the board, if each board member would take a look specifically at board policy 4.60. Of course, it's not going to be resolved on tonight, but it's one of my takeaways from the COSBA conference is many districts have presentations, and the board listened to the presentation, and there's very little or no discussion, and then the next board meeting, we vote. So it is worth being more engaged and asking questions. It does not mean that you are not in support of items in a presentation, but it is worth having more discussion and asking those questions. Because typically what happens, there's a presentation, and the presentation is lengthy, and there's no conversation, and 6 months to a year later, there's questions that come up, and the answer is, well, the board voted on it. So I'm asking that each board member take a look at policy 4.60, because it's been a while since it has been revised, if it needs to be revised, and what that revision looked like. So because we vote, it is important that we vote on the knowledge that we have. So it is worth looking into what all the factors that play into a responsible bidder. And yes, there's Mr. Carpenter bring forth a good point. Yes, there's other criteria that need to be met, but as we continue on in business practices, it's worth looking at it and consider any revisions in regards to the policy. Mrs. Bennett?
So to clarify, so between now and in 2 weeks from now, is the plan for legal to review the policy to provide any revisions if necessary? It's the board to do that? It's both? What's the direction between now and the 19th?
So legal will definitely have input, but board members should have input as well, because we vote in regards to contracts. And so it is worth knowing and understanding responsible bidding and its policy. So I'm asking board members to look at that information. And of course, legal is going to share and give recommendations, but a board policy should be, and at some point, speaking of policies, I think it is worth, because we have, like, board policy, for an example, board policy 4.60 may have 5 cross-reference policies. And what I noticed, now we updated 4.60 to reflect the $35,000, but there was a cross-reference policy associated with that policy that had not been reviewed or revised, and it still had the $25,000 amount in there. So it's a lot of work, and I think that there's a lot of work to be done where it relates to policy. But for board members' knowledge and really understanding the responsible bidder, then we need to look at updating policies. Organization is governed through policies. And if it's not in policies, if there's not adequate and updated policies, we are not held accountable. Now, legal, of course, position is to protect the district of liabilities, right? But at the same time, we can't avoid policies because we are avoiding accountability. And it is, unfortunately, for whatever reason, it looks like policies were never really looked at in detail. So Mr. Paul Noli is present if anyone have any questions where it relates to contracts and responsible bidding. He did an extensive presentation, but we didn't want anyone to leave and not have any questions answered in regards to the policy 4.0. Did everyone, I have some information, and to AI, there's tons of information out there on responsible bidding and policies. We're not policy experts, but at some point, if we need to, we'll consider a consultant with regards to policies. And Mr. Noli is here, and he was asked to be here, and he sat through the entire meeting.
I know it's been a long meeting, but I will ask Mr. Noli a question.
Mr. Noli, you can come to the mic. Good evening.
The policy that, or the changes to the policy that you proposed, are there, do you know who, like if somebody was arguing against it, what would they be arguing? Or who would be making that argument?
You want to on? It's a button right in front of you.
Thank you. There are a couple common arguments against responsible bidder policies. The two main ones I would speak to would be that it increases costs and it reduces competition, which the research shows actually the opposite. So those are the two common arguments that we face.
And who would be making those arguments?
Generally, contractors or associations or representative of those contractors that do not invest in workforce training, apprenticeship programs, and workforce development.
And I think one other question I think that I don't think I had asked. Are there other school districts that have a similar policy as this?
There are a small handful of school districts within the state of Illinois, none in Winnebago County, that have this policy, but there are school districts within the state that have them, yes.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I appreciate you being here, taking the time and sitting through, and we will definitely reach out if there's any additional questions.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? So I would like to discuss the dance policy that is being recommended because it is obsolete. So I don't think that this policy should be repealed. What I think should happen is principals, whether it is the 8th grade dance, prom and homecoming, so that schools do not have separate policies, to come together and come to some universal type of policy where it relates to the dance policy. So I definitely agree that it's obsolete, but I think that we have opportunity to revive it so that it reflects across the board. And that will decrease any confusion, East versus Guilford or Auburn versus. So if there is a standard, a policy in place, that would be most beneficial.
Madam President?
Yes.
So I did observe the discussion at the last meeting, and I think the concern from Mr. Carpenter, similar to what you just detailed now, what was not mentioned is that there are proposed changes to the student handbook to incorporate the language of the policy and update it to be more consistent, a little bit more modernized, but essentially the language of the policy is captured in the student handbook. So it's not that it doesn't exist anywhere, it's in the handbook.
Okay, so being in the handbook is not enough.
Okay. But I just wanted to clarify, because the specific question from Mr. Carpenter is, was there a location where it could uniformly be found by the principals? So there is.
Okay.
And acknowledging your statement.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? So, Mrs. Bennett?
Ms. Goldsmith, for the, board policy 7.191.
Yes.
For the attached administrative regulation, if you go to, if you go to the last page when it says superintendent or designee in line item 4 on page 3 says building principal or their designee, and then superintendent or designee. Who would traditionally be designee in both of those instances?
So Dr. Jarrett can correct me if I'm wrong, but I do believe that the chief of schools was the head of the project of compiling the information last school year and getting that submitted to ISB.
That's correct.
For both 4 and 5?
For number 5. Thank you
Okay.
for that clarification. And for number 4, it would essentially be the building principal that evaluated any incident that resulted to injury to students. But the reporting process is handled and supervised by the building principal. So whenever there's a restraint incident and the form is completed and submitted, the building principal would be the one responsible for informing the parent in the timely manner as required by statute.
So if there was a designee, who would that be in the building?
Typically, I don't see building principals.
Yeah, usually the principal. Yeah, it'd be the principal or an assistant principal.
So could, or his or her designee be taken out then, if the designee isn't an appropriate person to rely on?
I think we leave that there because in the instance that a principal may have that day off and there's such a short turnaround on the submission of those forms and informing the parents, they want the assistant principal or other supervisory authority to be able to handle it.
Okay, thank you.
So in regards to this particular policy, 7.191, and again, I'm challenged with board docs, but I think we got it here. So, yeah, it's right here. So I'll just ask this question. a designee, so anyone, by definition, just for clarity and public knowledge, how would you define restraint?
Okay, there's a statutory definition for restraint. There's language in the statute and in the regulation itself that defines restraint. And there's also a definition for timeout. So all of those things are defined. And they also are defined in the negative to exclude the momentary instances of contact to avoid, someone striking someone or destroying something.
Okay, so this is a policy that we have access to in board docs. Yes. Is there a quick reference in schools that is hands-on for school staff to review in terms of a procedure regarding restraining?
I know that the SPED department has a procedural library that they go over with all of their administrators. And I also believe the restraint piece is brought up in the annual discipline training to make sure that we are informing all of our staff about what appropriate contact looks like with students. So that contact can range from, with kindergartners, how you move a student from one place to another if required, or whether or not how to determine if that is necessary. So many times you'll hear of, well, not many times, let me clarify. Sometimes you will hear of rooms of small children being cleared out because one student is throwing chairs or throwing tables. In those instances where there's not an imminent risk of serious harm to others, but there's definitely something disturbing and distracting occurring, they may clear the room so that that student who is going through whatever they're going through is able to settle down rather than have an inappropriate contact with that student.
I would just also add, beyond special education, all staff are trained now on CPI. We did that last year. We will continue to do that this year. So there's an annual emphasis on this to ensure that we are making sure that teachers and staff have the training they need to be successful, as well as administrators.
Very good. So one last request in regards to policies. When there's a policy up for review, can we please take a look at those cross-reference policies associated to the policy at hand?
Noted, yes.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions or comments regarding any of 10, the governance committee 10A through D? If not, we're on to the governance consent agenda items. 11 through A, meeting minutes, memorandum of understanding, International Baccalaureate Program, freedom of information log. Are there any questions? So I have a question in regards to 11B. Bear with me one moment. Well, actually, there is an email with details in regards to the International Baccalaureate Program. So due to the time, I am not going to address that at this point.
I will add that there will be a full report submitted to the board going back to the original intent of the program, as well as I believe we're still scheduled for a board presentation, but this week's update will have additional information on IB.
Okay, so we don't have any speakers on tonight. Are there any other board member comments recommendation by the board. Vice President McCall did indicate that she would like to report out on her experience with CASBA. And how about, do you want to do that at the next board meeting or in April? Okay, so the committee of the whole is typically long, so we can do that at the second board meeting in April. And I need to just let the board members know that we really need to consider, just because I'm getting feedback in regards to the gap between board meetings and discipline and what's really going on with students getting placed and how effective. That reminds me, are we able, the students that are learning via the web in the interim of placement, are we able to pull data in terms of the usage? How are we measuring the usage of the online schooling while they wait?
So if we're talking about our ALOP program, which is the program that we run, we take attendance, and there's teacher requirements for students, so they have to be on screen. So in terms of they're doing their work remotely. They're not on a system doing that work.
Okay, and you have data that you can provide the board in terms of attendance and?
Yes.
Okay, can you forward that, please?
For sure, yes.
Okay, okay, very good. Are there any other questions or concerns at 9:10? Mr. Carpenter?
Well, can you finish your thought about or did you finish your thought about what we had to be concerned about the gap?
Yes, so that was one of the concerns. First, the wait time between an infraction and by the time it comes to the board. And that is a concern of some parents. And it was, Mrs. Lawrence did explain that is minimum, but the public is arguing that. And I'm open to suggestions in regards to board members, and I just don't want things missed or prolonged because of actually the main board, actually it's one board meeting that we have closed session.
To clarify, is the concern people have between the time that an incident happens and a decision's made, or from the time a decision's made until a student is placed in an alternative? Both, okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So that's just, we're going to table that. I really would like to, believe that we can continue on and be effective, but if not, then that is something that we may have to reconsider. If nothing else, I'll take a motion in a second to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Good night. Thank you. We can go home now. No one's moving. It's like.